Chapter 701. One Tao Fruit in One Lifetime. And the Tao fruits of 2 lifetimes are all left in the future. Yin Nuoxing muttered softly and frowned. He felt that something was amiss, and something didn't make sense. Why didn't Ling Yuqin use the Tao fruit I left behind, but instead buried it with his, right? Feng Yuang asked probingly when she saw his contemplative expression. Yeah. Yin Nuoxing nodded lightly. He also had many things he wanted to know, and it was impossible for him to hide anything now. At this moment, Feng Yuang took a deep breath, and his deep gaze made Yin Nuoxing unable to see through him. After a while, he looked towards the horizon and let out a long sigh. I don't know how many generations of Tao fruits the we of the first life and the he of the first life left behind in the samsara of samsara. I can only guess that he was plotting something and didn't hesitate to fall into samsara. Feng Yuang let out a long sigh, then stretched out a finger and pointed towards the sky, and muttered, "For example, God." Yin Nuoxing took the initiative to voice out his guess, making himself take in a cold breath. We have the bloodline of the ancient gods, and this bloodline was passed down from the mythological era and has yet to be erased. However, with the passage of time, perhaps a flaw has appeared in our bloodline, and it is difficult to give birth to someone at the level of God. So, Feng Yuang muttered, in the primordial era, there was a god who used the heavenly samsara to bury one lifetime after another. Yin Nuoxing also had a very bold idea, and this idea made him shudder, leaving behind the last lifetime for him to open his Tao fruit. Could it be that the first lifetime wanted to break through to the God realm? There is such a possibility, but I don't know the specifics. Feng Yuang shook his head, muttered to himself for a while, and said, the cultivation of the later God realm is very difficult, and the cultivation speed seems to have stopped. No matter how talented you are, no matter how hard you work, your cultivation won't improve much. The realm of the later God realm is completely dependent on the accumulation of time. With that kind of strength, perhaps it won't move for tens of millions of years. This voice made Yin Nuoxing tremble. Thousands of years had passed, and the world had changed, but the gods had not made any progress. By the way, speaking of which, why did you say it was me? Yin Nuoxing scratched her head and asked. I also analyzed this based on my bloodline. Feng Yuang said, although we escaped from the path of reincarnation, it doesn't mean that we didn't experience reincarnation. It's just that it wasn't complete. But no matter what, from the moment we buried ourselves and went through reincarnation, we were no longer the original us. What fell from the path of reincarnation is a brand new life. In this life, there are no signs of the ancient god bloodline awakening. Even after I became a god, there is only a faint golden color. Feng Yuang sighed and shook her head, then said, as for Ling Yuqin, when he stepped into the later god realm, he awakened 1/10 of his god bloodline. But you, at the demon realm, you have already awakened more than half. And you don't have any memories of the heaven-returning reincarnation. So I'm thinking, could it be that in this life of yours, this long, dozens of eras of reincarnation have come to an end? Feng Yuang's eyes shone brightly as she guessed, because you have already planted countless seeds, waiting to reap the fruits in this life. Yin Nuoxing was stunned hearing this. It had to be said that this guess was very daring, so daring that it made her heart palpitate. Then doesn't that mean that I can become a god? Yin Nuoxing suddenly grinned, flung her long hair, and laughed. As expected, I am the core. To hell with you. Feng Yuang rolled his eyes. He already knew that Yin Nuoxing would say this, so he couldn't help but pour a bucket of cold water on her. With your demonic chi entangling your soul, what god? You're a demon god. Yin Nuoxing helplessly shrugged his shoulders. But after a while, that playful attitude suddenly disappeared, because he thought of a very serious question. Then, if I were to merge with my previous life, who would I become? When she asked this question, Yin Nuoxing was very nervous. She was very worried that if there was a day when all those memories were to awaken at once, what would he become? Feng Yuang was also stunned by this question. If you're to merge with his previous life and grasp 2, 3, or even a dozen memories, then what would Yin Nuashing become? That will depend on you. That's up to you. I'm me, I'm you, and you're me. There's no distinction between us. A dozen memories are nothing more than a dozen identities. As for who you want to be, that's up to you. You can treat it as a dream and seal those memories in the depths of your mind. It's fine if you've seen them, but you can also combine them with your own memories. After all, that's us and us in the end. This topic was a bit heavy, and Feng Yuing also felt that she couldn't continue, so she had no choice but to shut her mouth. On the other hand, Yin Nuashing only sighed, helplessly scratched his head, and bitterly smiled. Let's talk about it in the future. When that day comes, let's talk about it again. Her hands folded in front of her chest. Yin Nuashing closed her eyes and lightly said, I am Yin Nuashing. This thing called me, I will not lose it. I am me. I am Yin Nuashing, and also Feng Yuing. Well, it's good that you can think like that. Feng Yuing indifferently shrugged her shoulders. You can say that, but right now I should just honestly be Yin Nuashing. I'm almost doubting if I am myself. Yin Nuashing bitterly smiled, shook his head, and then said, Speaking of which, why did you appear here today? This. Feng Yuing paused, then clapped her hands and explained softly, I placed a few restrictions in my soul. If I'm lucky enough not to be destroyed by the cycle of reincarnation, I'll appear at the appropriate time. As for why now, it's because I sense Shui Er's aura. Feng Yuing embarrassedly scratched his head and dryly smiled. That scepter is Shui Er's divine right weapon. It's an existence similar to the divine right controlled by a god. You forcefully used that power and almost killed yourself. If it wasn't for Shui Er being careful and leaving a protective measure, you would have been turned into an ice sculpture. Feng Yuing put her hands on her hips and unhappily said, How can a mortal use divine right? Nonsense. Yin Nuashing shrunk his head and couldn't help but refute. But back then, I didn't use this, and I felt that it was too much of a pity to use the whirlpool zither. I can only use it 3 times. Feng Yuing rolled his eyes and unhappily said, Schwer's protective measure caused the power of ice and snow to remain in my body, and it didn't completely erupt. Right now, I'm just speechless and blinded in one eye. After a while, I'll really be blind. Power of ice and snow. It's fine to use divine flames to disperse it, right? Yin Nuashing rubbed his fingers and said, Okay, but it's a waste. Feng Yuing shook her head, then raised her head. Seeing his blank face, she couldn't help but roll her eyes and said, Have you forgotten about your eternal frozen earth ice holy dragon egg? No, I still remember, but it's almost dead and can't even hatch. Yin Nuashing sighed. How could he forget? Inject the remaining power of ice and snow into the dragon egg, and it should be able to revive, hatch, and form a soul contract. I don't think Feng and Little White will mind. Feng Yuing smiled and said, After solving the problem in your body, you can even hatch a holy dragon. It's the best of both worlds. You won't die of happiness. Feng is fine, but I feel that Little White will bite me to death. Yin Nuashing's face twitched. Raising 2 divine beasts was already too much for him, and now there's another one. It's fine, it's fine. Train your resistance to beatings, and Little Green and Little Xian will find you one day. At that time, you'll have to raise 4 divine beasts and a sacred beast. Feng Yuing patted Yin Nuashing's shoulder with a pitiful gaze, causing a vein to pop out on the latter's forehead, and he wanted to press him to the ground and beat him up. Speaking of which, I didn't even find the phoenix back then. I didn't expect it to be hidden in such an inconspicuous corner. Looking at Yin Nuashing's memories, Feng Yuing was also a bit speechless. Back then, he ran to so many places, but he still couldn't find the last of the 4 divine beasts. He didn't expect that Yin Nuashing would find it just like that. Thinking of this, Feng Yuing smiled strangely and said, Forget about finding the phoenix. You even raised her as your wife. Did you already have the idea of raising the phoenix? I'm going to beat you to death. Yin Nuashing's face twitched, and he couldn't stop it. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. What was this? Finding Feng was purely an accident. At that time, He heard Feng Er's call, or was it because Feng Er had some kind of relationship with him that he found her? Now that he thought of it, that feeling had already disappeared. Cough, then there's no time to lose. Take out the holy dragon egg. I'll control the cold aura in your body. Feng Yueing coughed dryly and said with a chuckle. Yin Nuoxing helplessly rolled his eyes. With a flip of his palm, he took out the jade mountain and crystal. After that, he took out the golden holy dragon egg with ice blue patterns and gently placed it in front of him. After the ice snow holy dragon egg came out, it emitted a strange holy aura, causing Yin Nuoxing's expression to slightly freeze. This dragon egg had been frozen for who knows how many years, yet was still able to emit such an aura. Then, get ready. I'm going to take action. Hold it in and don't scream. Feng Yueing's confident and elegant expression was also slightly restrained. He took a deep breath and seriously looked at Yin Nuoxing. This line is really terrible. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes, but did not say anything. He sat down on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. Feng Yueing faintly smiled. He raised his right hand and slowly pressed it on Yin Nuoxing's shoulder, while his left hand pressed on the ice snow holy dragon egg. After that, he took a deep breath and forcefully clenched his right hand. A strange suction force instantly erupted. Crack! When the suction force erupted, Yin Nuoxing's brows furrowed. That suction force was tearing his blood and bones and was not acting on his spiritual body. However, that pain was precisely transmitted to his spiritual body, causing him to tightly clench his hands. When Feng Yueing started, Yin Nuoxing also hurriedly put some of his consciousness into his body. After that, he saw that when Feng Yueing's right hand landed on his spiritual body, there seemed to be an invisible black hole appearing in his physical body. A terrifying suction force erupted, and even his blood was being sucked in that direction. However, what made Yin Nuoxing even more concerned was that he suddenly felt very cold, extremely cold. His hands and feet were ice cold. The cold air that caused his entire body to be ice cold seemed to have appeared out of thin air. An ice blue ball was hidden in his body, and it did not dissipate. This is the ice snow energy that has merged with divine right. Yin Nuoxing's gaze was strange as he looked at the ice blue energy that appeared on his chest. He suddenly took a deep breath, and the cold caused his teeth to chatter. He immediately hugged his hands and curled up his body. Endure it, endure it. Feng Yueing was not surprised by this reaction. After that, the suction force on her right hand suddenly increased. Under that sudden increase in pressure, Yin Nuoxing felt as if his bones were about to leave his body. However, the sudden increase in pressure was not useless. At least he saw that the ball of ice blue energy that was hovering on his chest was slowly flowing like a liquid. The distance from his left shoulder to his chest was about the length of a finger. When the ice blue energy flowed past him, he felt as if his left shoulder was about to be frozen into ice. Fortunately, this energy did not spread throughout his body. Otherwise, he would definitely be frozen into an ice sculpture. There was no other possibility. Yin Nuoxing shivered and hugged himself tightly. The cold sensation stimulated his mind, causing his soul to feel drowsy. His body could not stop trembling. He did not know how much time had passed, but he felt as if every second was like a year. However, the ice blue energy was not flowing at a fast speed. At this moment, the ball of energy was completely concentrated on his shoulder, and he had lost all feeling in his left shoulder. The ice blue energy flowed slowly. Yin Nuoxing's originally pale face was now as white as gold paper. His eyelids drooped and opened, and they were as heavy as mountains. Meanwhile, Feng Yueing was calmly absorbing the ice snow energy. After traveling with Yin Nuoxing for so many years, it was normal for them to be exposed to wind and snow. He had long gotten used to that energy, and it made him feel nostalgic. However, when he saw Yin Nuoxing's face that was about to turn purple from the cold, he could not help but laugh dryly. He hurriedly increased the speed at which he was extracting the energy. As for the icy blue energy, after coming out from Yin Nuoxing's body, it followed Feng Yueing's two arms and drilled into the ice snow Saint Dragon Egg. Instantly, the icy blue pattern seemed to have come alive, faintly releasing light. Just as the light was released, this ice field seemed to resonate with it, and even the icebergs were trembling, so powerful. As expected of the Ice Snow King, if it evolves into a sacred beast, its control of the ice-snow energy should be comparable to Shui-Er's. Feng Yuang looked at the memory scene that was constantly trembling and could not help but laugh to himself. "All right, it's done," a relaxed voice sounded out, causing Yun Nuoxing to be taken aback. When this voice sounded out, he immediately felt that his body was no longer cold. His recovery ability, which had been suppressed for the past month, seemed to have suddenly soared. Waves of flames surged into his body, causing him to involuntarily blink. "It's done? Although it's true that I'm not cold anymore, and my body is also recovering." Yin Nuoxing blinked his eyes. Furthermore, he felt that something was not quite right, as if there were some changes to his body, as if it had become tougher. "Are you still thinking that your body will only be considered done after being blown into pieces?" Feng Yuang rolled his eyes, then said in a bad mood, "Well, going through the divine rite baptism once will only bring you benefits and no harm. I guess this is also Shui-Er's intention. Although your body has already been baptized by Xian Yin's divine rite of music, going through the baptism of the ice-snow sacred rite again will only bring about good changes. Slowly experience it." Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing clenched his fists and scratched his head in confusion. He did not feel any special changes. If he had to say it, he just felt that he was a little more powerful. Chapter 702. On a vast ice field, there were ice sculptures that had stood for tens of millions of years. Under the extremely weak light, they emitted an icy glow. This was a world of ice and snow. Sunlight couldn't penetrate it. Below the huge ice sculpture, there was a 1-meter-tall object floating in midair. It emitted a faint glow. The frequency was perfectly in sync with the heartbeat. It was as if there was a powerful life form inside. At the side, Feng Yuang sat on the ground with his left arm resting on his thigh. He supported his cheek as he watched Yin Nuoxing fiddle around. Seeing him throw out a bunch of things and constantly refine them into the dragon egg, his face couldn't help but twitch. This was simply a moving treasure. Even a god like him would drool just looking at it. God, I didn't manage to take that step in the end. If I had chosen to live a carefree life back then, would I have had the chance to step into that level? Feng Yuang couldn't help but mutter. He grabbed an ice blue flower from the ground and let out a long sigh. The problem is that you chose to bury yourself and fall into the cycle of reincarnation. Now that you think about it, it's useless. Yin Nuoxing held an ice blue crystal and looked at him helplessly. "I know. I'm just muttering. It's a pity. I'm already so pitiful. It's not wrong for me to mutter a few words." Feng Yuang puffed up his cheeks and couldn't help but sigh again. "You said Xian Yin is a god?" Holding the crystal in his hand, Yin Nuoxing looked at him suspiciously. "Yeah, that's right. To be able to make even me feel shocked, it must be of a higher level, God. These things, any one of them can create a bunch of old monsters." Feng Yuang was speechless as he watched Yin Nuoxing take out pieces of things one by one. Yin Nuoxing nodded. He didn't seem surprised. He already felt that Xian Yin's background wasn't simple. As he thought about it, he grabbed another flower. This flower had 4 petals, and each petal was a different color. As for the long stamen that extended out, it revealed an azure blue color like flowing water. It was like looking back at the sky while diving. Under the sunlight, there were spots of light, and it was very beautiful. "Damn, you even took out the ice lily. You're really generous." The 4-colored light circulated and spread out, gathering on the stamen of the flower. Then, it was reflected from the stamen, illuminating a myriad of colors. There was also a strange fragrance, as if an immortal flower had bloomed. The ice lotus flower contained the power of the natural order of the world. It was rumored that it also possessed the power of the world and was extremely intelligent. If the members of the demon clan were to find out about it, they would definitely fight for it at all costs. If this ice lotus flower was refined by a demonic beast or a magical beast, it would allow it to possess the ice element. Moreover, if it was refined before it was born, its intelligence would increase by more than one level. It would also allow it to come into contact with the power of the natural order and the power of the world. In the future, it could become a demon god. Such a big piece of ice spirit crystal. God, no, no, no. Can you put down the spiritual deity crystal? I beg you, why not give it to me? I'm already dead. Feng Yuing looked at Yin Nuoxing, taking out pieces of shocking stuff, as if those things were worthless. He was so scared that his soul was about to shatter. Even if the spiritual deity crystal was refined by a god-level expert, it could allow the bloodline, soul, bones, intelligence, and divinity to be reborn. It could even speed up the cultivation of the power of the divine right, allowing one to have the power to reach the heavens. This, you're giving it to a little thing that hasn't even hatched. Puff. Looking at Yin Nuoxing refining the fist-sized crystal into the ice snow holy dragon egg, Feng Yuing almost vomited blood. His face turned green, and he couldn't help but scold. Is it your illegitimate child? Wah. Celestial spirit, tree leaf. Celestial spirit branch. My lord, how many years can this branch extend one's lifespan when refined into medicine? This life force can make a land of death within a radius of 100 million miles become full of life. Even a dying divine spirit can be revived. It contains a large amount of the power of the laws of heaven and earth. How many years can it shorten one's cultivation? It can control the power of laws the moment it hatches. That's the privilege of a god-level expert. It's a privilege. Imperial dragon vine and heavenly phoenix fruit. It can only be cultivated using pure dragon's blood and phoenix's blood. Feng Yuing was so angry that his face turned pale. He trembled as he looked at the pile of stuff that Yin Nuoxing took out. His expression couldn't help but tremble. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. His colorful eyes looked at the ice snow holy dragon egg with unconcealable joy. This time, it could be said that he had accidentally brought this egg to life. He couldn't stop the thought of cultivating it. As the pile of stuff was refined into the dragon egg, the golden ice snow holy dragon egg also trembled slightly, emitting an even gentler auspicious light. It was as if there was a divine beast that could send down auspicious signs. You're even letting out blood. Feng Yuing saw Yin Nuoxing cut his wrist and spit out a mouthful of soul blood. His heart couldn't help but twitch. 7-colored extreme light, celestial pond water. Damn, it hasn't even been born, and you want it to be reborn. What should I say? This child is going to be spoiled by you. Seeing Yin Nuoxing throw in some extremely terrifying divine items, Feng Yuing finally couldn't watch it anymore. He quickly pulled him back and smiled bitterly. All right. Stop doing it. My heart was just aching earlier, but I can understand. After all, it hasn't been born yet, and nothing has been decided yet. If you continue throwing in divine items that don't exist in the mortal realm, it will definitely break out of its shell as a heaven demon king. However, going too far is as bad as falling short. I know. I'm still calculating. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and sat down as well. She supported her cheeks with her hands and stared at the holy dragon egg without blinking. Her gaze was as gentle as it could be. Feng Yuing also heaved a sigh of relief and sat down with the same posture. Looking from afar, these two people really looked like two sisters or two brothers. The holy dragon egg rotated gently and emitted circles of ice-blue ripples. The divine items that had just fused and were refining it to the extreme. Before hatched, the aura already had a very terrifying momentum. Furthermore, it was still slowly brewing. What a powerful spirituality. Who knows? It might even be in a human form when it hatches. Furthermore, oh, congratulations. It's a girl. Feng Yuing looked and couldn't help but laugh. What's with this kind of good news for a father waiting outside the delivery room? Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but roll her eyes and fiercely complain. You plan to take her into your harem? Feng Yuing said with a smile that wasn't a smile. You're thinking too much. Yin Nuoxing couldn't stop rolling her eyes. I can't help but think too much. First there was Feng then there was this. Let's call her. Oh, let's call her Bing Air. That's right, the ice snow holy dragon of the frigid winter earth will be called Bing Air. Feng Yuing clapped her hands and casually came up with a name, just like Yin Nuashing. That's fine, as long as the name isn't bad. Yin Nuashing thought for a while and nodded. After all, she really didn't have any talent in naming. Hee, let's make a bet. Feng Yuing looked at the holy dragon egg that was emitting a holy light and laughed. Bet on what? Bet on Bing Air's attitude towards you in the future. Yes, yes. I bet that she will fall in love with you. Feng Yuing laughed. Why? Yin Nuashing raised her eyebrows. She felt that there was something fishy about this. Because Feng Yuying's face trembled. He seemed to have thought of something that happened when he was alive. He couldn't help but bitterly laugh. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, because I also had a similar experience. Yin Nuashing looked at him in shock. Hee. You'll know when you get my memories. I reckon that girl isn't dead yet. Cough. Let's not talk about these digressions. Halfway through, Feng Yuing couldn't help but blush. He hurriedly waved his hand. This made Yin Nuashing very curious about what he recalled. However, she didn't ask. She casually nodded and said, Up to you. All right, I'll leave Shui to you. Take good care of her. Feng Yuying's voice suddenly became serious. Yin Nuashing also slowly retracted her lazy expression. Her bright eyes looked at him strangely. Then, she thought of the noble lady with long, ice-blue hair and felt a little confused. Sister Shui is a god. Me? Take care of her? Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. That's not it. Feng Yuing also rolled his eyes and said, No matter how strong she is, she's still a girl. She naturally has a weak spot in her heart. My passing has become an eternal pain in her heart. This burden needs to be smoothed out by another person's burden. The flame in her heart that was extinguished has been reignited because of your arrival. However, she can't let go of the pain in her heart, so she still needs you to take care of her. You are me, and I am you. Can't you even agree to your own request? Feng Yuing puffed up her cheeks and pretended to be angry as she looked at Yin Nuashing and said. Yin Nuashing was speechless. She didn't know what to say. She could only sigh and nod her head. I promise you, remember to marry her. There's no need to be extravagant. Just give her a status. Feng Yuing propped up her face and said with a smile. Yin Nuashing nodded. Suddenly, she felt that something wasn't right. She suddenly opened her eyes wide. No. I promised you to take care of Sister Shui. This is different. Yin Nuashing's face turned red as she hurriedly said. This is the same thing. Feng Yuing slapped him and said, 3 years ago, you owed that girl a wedding. If you don't make it up to her, who will? But in any case, you will retrieve this part of your memories sooner or later. I know about the chains of the heart. This isn't a problem at all. Once your memories return, your feelings will also return. Feng Yuing smiled mysteriously. She pointed at her heart and said with a smile, Moreover, in your heart, there are 2 very, very faint imprints that have sprouted. Yin Nuashing's eyes almost popped out. She flew into a rage out of humiliation. She grabbed Feng Yuying's collar and shook her crazily. Her face and ears were red. No, don't talk nonsense. Me. Those are Xian's and Feng Er's imprints, right? It must have been hard on those 2 girls to follow you, you stinky rock, for so many years. Finally, there's a reaction. Why don't I help you? Feng Yuing was shaken to the point that he could still speak normally. A devilish smile hung on his face. That smile was exactly the same as Yin Nuashing's. How is that possible? Yin Nuashing suddenly shook him off and hurriedly took a few steps back. Just now, when he heard those words, his heart was already restless, and at this moment, his face looked like it was about to burn. He hurriedly shook his head and said, Don't say I anymore. If you like her, then say it boldly. Can't you be more mature, like me? Feng Yuing slapped her again and said in annoyance, You are so unreasonable that I have nothing to say. Yin Nuashing was so angry that her hair stood up. Thank you. Feng Yuing grinned, then said, You really can't blame those 2 girls. You always feel that there shouldn't be anyone who likes you. But why is it like this? Don't you have any idea? Feng Yuing glared at Yin Nuoxing and said indifferently, think about how you usually treat others, then think about how you are like. Reevaluate. If you were to go out, you would be a femme fatale, just like us. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. Feng Yuing continued, treating others gently is a part of your nature that can never be changed. We are originally the kind of people who are indifferent and gentle. Coincidentally, girls like to be treated gently by others. To put it bluntly, it's called being submissive. With a face that kills both men and women, how can you not ruin things? Yin Nuoxing was silent. Kacha, while Feng Yuing was lecturing Yin Nuoxing, who had his head lowered, the sacred dragon egg had also reached a saturated state under the nourishment of countless amounts of energy. A small figure slowly appeared. The sound of the eggshell cracking caused the two of them to calm down as they calmly watched this scene. Chapter 703. Tiny cracks appeared on the golden eggshell, and the spinning body stopped. The bright golden light converged and bloomed from the cracks. The golden light had a sense of holiness and holiness. When it landed in this world of ice and snow, it was refracted by the ice into the sky. The sky was dyed a golden yellow by the brilliant golden light, as if the sun had just risen. Roar! In the sky, strange beasts suddenly appeared. They stepped on auspicious clouds and descended from the sky towards the golden light. Their roars seemed to contain joy and reverence. Following the first crack, the cracks on the holy dragon egg caused a chain reaction. The tiny cracks rapidly spread, covering the entire golden egg. With a series of cracking sounds, a large piece of the eggshell fell off. Then, in the brilliant sky, a golden pillar of light hundreds of meters tall descended, landing on the holy dragon egg, illuminating it and making it seem even more holy. Whoa! The worship of thousands of beasts, an auspicious sign descending from the sky. Such a phenomenon is rare. This golden light should be the heavenly glow baptism. It's a rare sight. If the people of the Yao clan were to see it, they would definitely use the power of their clan to nurture it. Feng Yuing looked at the golden light, not far away, and could not help but praise. Before the golden light descended, Yin Nuoxing and Feng Yuing had already retreated. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing was a little confused and could not help but ask, "What is the heavenly glow baptism?" Feng Yuing smiled and pointed at the sacred dragon egg that was enveloped by the golden light. The heavenly glow baptism mostly occurs when some saint beasts or divine beasts are born. This is a phenomenon caused by the birth of the heavens and earth. It is the purest energy of the heavens and earth and can wash away all the impurities in the body. It is also seen as an auspicious sign. Of course, even some small Yao clan or small demonic beast can cause such a phenomenon. This also means that the demonic beast or demonic beast that is born has the potential to evolve into a saint beast or divine beast and will be nurtured by its clan. But Feng Yin Nuoxing was stunned. When Feng was born, there was no such phenomenon. As the most orthodox of the four divine beasts, they are above all races. With that kind of ancient bloodline, they are born to be kings among kings. Do they still need any phenomenon to prove themselves? Feng Yuing rolled her eyes at him. That's true. Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment and nodded. Magical beasts usually take human form at the devil realm, while demonic beasts will take human form at the mortal realm. They will retain the characteristics of demonic beasts on their bodies, which will slowly be hidden as they cultivate. Feng Yuing paused for a moment before continuing. Demons are born as humans. During their cultivation, they will attempt to transform their human body into a demon body. Don't you think it's ironic? He laughed again. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. When demonic beasts and demonic beasts pursued greater power, they would transform their bodies into human forms. However, when the demonic beasts cultivated, they would try to transform their bodies into demonic beasts. Obviously, the latter was more powerful and orthodox. Now that she said this, it seemed like she was putting the cart before the horse. As for the four divine beasts, they're classified as demonic beasts. That is their classification when they are in their infancy. Because divine beasts receive too much fortune from heaven and earth, they can only take human form at the beginner god realm. Feng Yueying stretched out her finger and shook it. In other words, only by entering the beginner god realm can they be considered to have passed their infancy. However, in terms of age, it's another matter. As for sacred beasts, well, you just need to know that normal demonic beasts and demonic beasts will evolve into sacred beasts. Sacred beasts will evolve into divine beasts. That's all you need to know. Feng Yueying smiled and said, for example, the scarlet dragon that you saw earlier. It was a normal demonic dragon. If it had the chance to purify the dragon blood in its body and evolve into a sacred beast, it would become a scarlet blood dragon. If it evolved again, it would become a purgatory dragon. That is an existence similar to a divine beast. The cultivation of demonic beasts and demonic beasts is vastly different from the cultivation of humans. The classification of normal demonic beasts, sacred beasts, and divine beasts is their bloodline. Even for demonic emperors, the possibility of their original form being a normal demonic beast is not small. After all, not every demonic beast and demonic beast has the power to cultivate their bloodline and evolve their original form. Feng Yueying turned her head and said, as for those beside you, needless to say about Feng Air and Little White, those 6 mid-tier demonic emperors, their original forms are sacred beasts. If they want to become divine beasts, they have to work hard on their bloodline. As for sacred beasts, they're existences that are only slightly lower than the 4 divine beasts. Is the name for divine beasts that are in the beginner god realm. In other words, if they want to evolve into sacred beasts, they have to evolve their original form into divine beasts. Otherwise, they will never be able to advance into the beginner god realm. Yin Nuoxing listened attentively. He did not know much about demonic beasts and demonic beasts. Previously, he did not come into contact with information on this aspect. He also did not hear Lachine and the rest mention it. Then what is Bing Air's state now? Yin Nuoxing looked at the golden light pillar and asked. Originally, the ice snow holy dragon was born as a sacred beast. Following the cultivation and evolution of the bloodline, it will become a divine beast. However, after your family's Bing Air was tormented by you, Feng Yueying pinched her fingers and looked at the golden light. She estimated in her heart and said after a long while, this bloodline pressure seems to be a divine beast. Then, from this dragon's might, it seems to be the son of God. PFFF. Feng Yueying suddenly laughed. Yin Nuoxing was confused and looked at the former in confusion. Feng Yueying laughed for a long while before waving her hand and said, hee, this little girl is quite sensible. Originally, according to the pile of things that you just threw, it should be able to smash her into a heaven demon. However, she suppressed the energy into her body. She probably transferred it to refine her physical body. There is a difference of 5 realms between a son of God and a divine god. Will there be a problem? Yin Nuoxing said worriedly. It's fine. After all, she is a divine beast. There won't be a problem at all. It will only make her physical body stronger. Feng Yueying smiled and shook her head. While the two were talking, the golden light seemed to have reached its limit. It scattered the thickest light from the sky and poured into the dragon egg. Then it slowly dissipated. As the thick golden light dissipated, the many demonic beasts in the sky roared and returned to nothingness. It was as if nothing had happened. If it wasn't for the huge hole that was torn open in the thick clouds in the sky, Yin Nuoxing would have thought that everything that had just happened was an illusion. Yin Nuoxing and Feng Yueying looked at each other. Then they slowly jumped down from the mountain peak and walked to the front of the golden holy dragon egg. After the golden light pillar dissipated, the huge golden egg with ice blue patterns did not have any movement. The light was all retracted. On the top of the holy dragon egg, there was a crack the size of a bowl. The crack sparkled with golden light. It was as if the baptism of the heavenly clouds was poured in from there. Ka! With a soft sound, another piece of the eggshell fell off. The golden light that had just dissipated seemed to have bloomed again. It turned the nearby ice surface into a golden color. Within the golden light, Yin Nuashing could feel a huge dragon's might. It made her excited and nervous. Don't be so excited. Slowly raise the child. However, the divine beast's intelligence is very high and it grows very quickly. Perhaps you don't have to worry about it. Feng Yueing chuckled. When he said the words, raise the child, he clearly saw that Yun Nuashing's forehead had darkened. When Yun Nuashing's face was filled with black lines, the eggshell also made a series of popping sounds and turned into pieces that fell to the ground. The little girl that appeared in front of Yin Nuashing and Feng Yueing was a little girl that only reached their knees. She was naked and her skin was as white as snow. The little girl seemed to be only 6 or 7 years old. Her long, ice blue wavy hair fell to her waist. A third of the long hair was a brilliant gold. Her cheeks were extremely white and her exquisite appearance was extremely cute. Her pair of blue-gold eyes were as pure as crystals, shining and translucent. You win. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but slap her forehead. Then, she slowly pulled it down. She even rolled her eyes and felt extremely speechless. What? I didn't think that you would have the thought of favoring boys over girls. Feng Yueing smiled and said strangely, Hey, I already have 4 to 5 little sisters. Having a little brother isn't bad either. The yin energy around me is heavy. Even I have more yin energy than yang energy. Yin Nuashing curled her lips and joked. Puffed. Haha, indeed, indeed. Feng Yueing held her stomach and laughed loudly. She even kept patting her shoulder, causing Yin Nuashing's face to twitch nonstop. After sighing, Yin Nuashing helplessly waved his hand and said softly, Sigh, forget it. It doesn't matter. Little sisters are used to dote on, and little brothers are used to abuse. There's nothing wrong with that. Damn, your little brother is so pitiful. Hearing this, Feng Yueing's mouth couldn't help but twitch. She bitterly smiled and then joked, This is your daughter. Scram. Yin Nuashing, who was walking forward, fiercely rolled his eyes. He really wanted to complain that he was only in his 30s and didn't want to be a father. However, he couldn't say it out loud. The little girl rubbed her dazed big eyes and stared at Yin Nuashing for a long while. That pair of big clear eyes flashed with some colors. She used her small hands to support herself on the ice and try to stand up. However, perhaps because she was just born and hadn't gotten used to this body yet, her calves couldn't help but tremble when she stood up. However, she still managed to stand firmly. After a while, she lifted her crystal-clear little feet and slowly walked towards Yin Nuashing. She can walk when she was just born. Her intelligence is indeed very high. Feng Yueing smiled in surprise. Why don't you complain that she looks like she's 6 or 7 years old when she was just born? Yin Nuashing helplessly glanced at him. His colorful eyes looked at the little girl. In a daze, he remembered the scene when he saw little Ming. He couldn't help but smile and walk 2 steps forward. When he was less than 2 meters away from her, he slowly squatted down. The little girl seemed to understand Yin Nuashing's meaning. She once again lifted her little feet and stiffly took 1 step after another. On her crystal-clear and delicate little face, her icy blue eyebrows slowly furrowed, as if she couldn't get used to it. Just when she wanted to take another step forward, she felt a dress on her body. Before she could react, she was gently hugged by a pair of warm and slender hands. Yin Nuashing smiled as he lifted the little girl over his head. He raised her so high that she was facing the sun. His colorful eyes looked at that pair of large blue-gold eyes. He seemed to see warmth and joy in that pair of blue-gold eyes. He couldn't help but smile and said, From today onwards, you will be called Bing Air. The little girl seemed to understand what he was saying. She nodded her little head forcefully. Then, 2 slender arms stretched out from the blue dress. Yin Nuashing saw this and hugged her, allowing her to pinch his cheeks with her little hands. Feng Yueing walked up from the side and reached out to touch Bing Air's arms. After sensing it for a while, he nodded and said, As expected, her aptitude is excellent. She is very close to the power of heaven and earth and the power of rules. And this little fist, I'm afraid it can send a mountain flying with a single punch. The power of the divine object will always stay in her body, constantly changing her physique to a perfect level. Her future achievements will definitely be very high. Becoming a shifter emperor shouldn't be a problem. As for becoming a shifter god, it will depend on whether you can give her a hand. Feng Yueing couldn't help but praise. Yin Nuoxing also nodded. As a god, it was very rare for the former to receive his praise. Wu Bing'er raised her head. That pair of clear eyes stared straight at Yin Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing also lowered his head to look at her. He reached out his hand and rubbed her little head with a smile. Little Bing'er's throat moved slightly. Her rose petal-like little mouth trembled carefully for a while. Suddenly, she slowly opened it. Although it was very small, she was trying her best to open it. Then, a tender voice slowly came out from her little mouth with some stiffness. Emo. Hearing this tender voice, Feng Yueing was stunned for a moment. Then his whole body trembled as he squatted down. Unrestrained laughter came out of his mouth. And when Yin Nuoxing heard this name and this laughter, his face suddenly became extremely dark. After little Bing'er finished speaking, her little hand pinched Yin Nuoxing's chest slightly, causing Yin Nuoxing's face to become extremely dark. Feng Yueing, who just stood up, saw this scene and directly spat out a mouthful of saliva. Then, he squatted down again while holding his stomach. Chapter 704. Bing'er, be a good girl and call me brother. Mother, dearest, ha! I'm dying of laughter. Ha ha ha! Cough, little Bing'er, I'm a guy. You have to see clearly. So, no matter how much you touch me, it's fine. N, mother, dearest? Ha 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 ha! You're such a killjoy. Can you stop laughing? Mother, no, Bing'er, I'm a guy. Stop touching me. It's swollen. Father, father? Ha ha ha! Congratulations to little Star for having a daughter. I'll beat you to death, you old bastard. Mother, father, don't fight. Yin Nuoxing and Feng Yueing, in such a huge ice field. Once this sentence came out, both of their faces turned extremely black. They felt a bone-piercing cold wind blowing into their bones, almost freezing them to death. Only little Bing'er looked at the two of them curiously with her pure big eyes. All right, this will do. Feng Yueing clapped her hands and looked at the blue-gold dragon mark on Yin Nuoxing and little Bing'er's forehead with satisfaction. She said, an unprecedented soul contract. With this deity's help, I guarantee that the compatibility will be above 200%. Little Bing'er was just born and naturally didn't know any soul contract. Originally, Yin Nuoxing didn't plan to form any soul contract and planned to wait until she grew up. However, little Bing'er was a beginner god-level expert when she was just born and needed a strong soul contract to stabilize the power in her body so that the power wouldn't go out of control. Thus, she had no choice but to form it. The highest compatibility is 100%. Feng, or Little White, and I have the same. We all have full compatibility. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Hey, young people really don't know anything. That's a soul contract formed by this deity as the middleman. Of course, it's different. Well, you will know this in the future. If you need, Little White and the rest will make adjustments in the future. Feng Yueing smiled and rubbed little Bing'er's head. Unclear. Yin Nuoxing covered her head speechlessly. She wanted to say something, but little Bing'er started moving around in her arms. He had no choice but to hug her tightly. All right, I have something I want to ask you. Yin Nuoxing suddenly thought of something. He abruptly raised his head and stared very seriously at Feng Yueing. Have you seen the Netherworld Ruin Sword? Your first godly sword. Feng Yueing stopped playing with Bing, and straightened her body. She shook her head and said, No, I once wanted to search for the Netherworld Sword, but I didn't find it. Or rather, I didn't even see any clues. That Nethervoid Sword. Yin Nuoxing frowned. Maybe Ling Yuchan found it somewhere and passed it to you. Feng Yueing rubbed her forehead, then smiled mysteriously and said, But I can't tell you the location of the fifth godly sword, demonic blood sword. What? Yin Nuoxing looked up in shock. The fifth godly sword. You will retrieve my memories sooner or later. You will know it sooner or later. Telling you now is the same as not telling you. Feng Yuing smiled faintly and looked to the east. Her eyes seemed to have seen through countless spaces and saw something. She took a breath and said, Kuan Yuan region, Blood Demon Valley. You should pray that it hasn't been taken away by someone yet. Feng Yuing smiled faintly. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and didn't say anything. After remembering the name, she lowered her head and played with little Bing Air. The little girl's giggles made the icy plains more lively. Also, Quarter Moon, the forbidden heavenly god from the ancient era, Quarter Moon. Why are you looking for him? Don't tell me that our first life is him. Yin Nuoxing suddenly raised her head and looked straight at Feng Yuing as she said softly, I don't think so. After looking at your memories, I found out that he was at that place. I went to that place back then, but I couldn't enter. Feng Yuing shook her head and said softly, Back then, the forbidden heavenly god sealed himself in the ice world's divine realm. In that state, it was impossible for him to activate the heaven-returning reincarnation. There wasn't enough life force to support him to walk out of the reincarnation road. Oh, so I feel that he might really be our ancestor? Feng Yuing tilted her head and said hesitantly, Anyway, we are definitely from the 9 Deity Temple's Grand Hall Master's lineage. Quarter Moon is the 9 Deity Temple's Grand Hall Master. We should have some connection with him, but he definitely can't be our first life. I dare to use my divine lattice to guarantee it. All right, I'll believe you this time. Seeing how confident he was, Yin Nuoxing couldn't think of any rebuttal. He coughed dryly and lowered his head to continue teasing little Bing Air. He had a lot of doubts, and it would be difficult for him to clear them all in a short period of time. Even if Feng Yuing was standing in front of him and had a lot of questions, he couldn't open his mouth. Feng Yuing smiled when she saw the two of them messing around. She raised her head and looked at the dark sky, after which she let out a long sigh and said, All right, your body is already recovered. Little White and Feng Er should have sensed that you have formed a new soul contract. It is about time for them to leave. Sensed it, Yin Nuoxing stopped what he was doing. Seeing this, little Bing Air pulled his long hair in front of her and wrapped it around her body. After all, those two were prejudiced by first impressions. They will definitely notice latecomers. Feng Yuing sighed and spread out her hands. Yin Nuoxing nodded. She rolled her eyes and seemed to have thought of something. Then she asked, What about you? Me? I'm just a remnant soul left in the depths of your soul. It's very deep, and no one can find it. If not for Schwerer's energy alerting me, I wouldn't have appeared. Feng Yuing shook her head and said, Don't worry about me. My remnant soul will always be sealed in your soul. If you die one day, I will follow you into the cycle of reincarnation and wait for a new life. Don't think about reviving me or anything. These things can wait until you reach God level. At that time, you might have a chance to awaken my remnant soul. It's just a chance. Feng Yuing smiled indifferently. As a person who is already dead, I have never had any special thoughts. The only regret I have is that I owe that girl a wedding. So I'll hand this matter to you very, very seriously. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and said, Wait until I retrieve the memories that belong to you. You actually didn't reject. Feng Yuing was shocked. Yin Nuoxing's face twitched. Although the power of the divine right has disappeared, your body has still been affected by the backlash. I estimate that you won't be able to speak for a month. As for your eyes, it's fine. Don't mess around in the future. That's why I didn't want it to happen. Yin Nuoxing shook her head helplessly. As for the matter of falling to the dark side, I followed the Maze Master's instructions and used Schwerer's divine right's power to leave a region in your body. As for how to choose, you can decide for yourself. Feng Yuing pointed at her chest and smiled. After smiling for a while, Feng Yuing patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder and said, Then, I'll hand this life over to you. You must uncover everything. Who are we? What do we want to do? This long-cherished wish that has spanned countless eras will be placed on your head. All right. I'll do my best. Yin Nuoxing nodded solemnly. Feng Yuing smiled and waved her hand. Her figure once again turned into specks of light and surged towards the ice sculpture, entering it and disappearing. Yin Nuoxing sighed and looked at little Bing Air, who was still playing with her long hair in her arms. She smiled and disappeared from the ice plains with her in her arms. As the two of them left, snow began to fall from the sky and slowly covered the numerous ice sculptures. The ice field regained its silence, and no sound could be heard. The huge mansion was silent. The sun shone brightly, but there was no sign of life. In the room with the open window, Yishi had already climbed down from Yin Nuoxing's body. She was sitting at the side, recovering. Her wine-red eyes would occasionally look at the tightly shut eyes on the bed. Lachine and the others were also quietly sitting at the side, stretching their tails and wings from time to time. The only thing that made them happy was that the snow-white hair had recovered its flowing, gorgeous color not long ago. Although they did not understand what had happened, they knew that it was a sign of improvement. They immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Since her body had recovered, she should be able to wake up soon. Just as they were thinking so optimistically, Feng Air, who was lying on the bed, suddenly woke up. She abruptly straightened her body. Her beautiful scarlet-pink Mei Mao, which was filled with spirituality, was filled with astonishment as she stared at the bed in puzzlement. Feng Air, you're awake. Yishi was also startled by her sudden sitting up. However, she did not think much of it and greeted her with a smile. Bang! Feng Air had just turned her head and nodded when the door to the room was kicked open. The sound of someone knocking on the door caused everyone to hurriedly turn their heads, only to see Whitey suddenly appear at the door. There was a strange look in its white tiger eyes. Before anyone could speak, Whitey's small body flashed and directly appeared at the bedside. Its tiger eyes looked strangely at Yin Nuoxing, who was sleeping soundly. After a while, it raised its head and looked at Feng Air, asking in confusion, "You also felt it?" Feng Air nodded. Mei Mao stared at Yin Nuoxing in confusion. "What's wrong?" Yishi jumped down from the bed next to her, walked to Yin Nuoxing's bedside, and jumped up. She tilted her head and asked in confusion. Feng Air glanced at her, and then said softly, "Something has formed a soul contract with the stars." Ah! Yishi and Lachine and Mei Mao were all stunned. Several pairs of bright eyes also looked at the bed in confusion. This fellow had been sleeping all this time. How could it have formed a soul contract? Ice attribute, dragon force, dragon clan, and this is the reaction of a divine beast. Whitey scratched the tiger whiskers on its face. Then its eyes narrowed, and it reached out to press on Yin Nuoxing's forehead. However, before it could reach out, Feng Air quickly stretched out her jade-like hand and grabbed Whitey's wrist. Mei Mao looked at it, shook her head, and said, "Let's wait for Xingxing to wake up." Hearing this, Whitey curled its lips. However, it did not say anything. After retracting its little hand, it climbed down from the bed. Just as it was about to sit at the side, it was stunned to see that there were dots of light flickering on the bed. This caused everyone to turn their gazes. Not long after the dots of light appeared, they gathered together and formed a small ball of light. Then, the ball of light shook slightly, and a little girl who was about 7 or 8 years old fell from it and sat on the bed. When Yishi and the others saw this scene, they could not help but be stunned. They looked at the little girl with strange expressions, and when they looked at each other, their eyes were a little blank. That aura is hers. Whitey was stunned for a moment, but it quickly reacted. After carefully sensing it, its eyes narrowed, and it said in a strange voice, "Ice Saint Dragon? Why didn't I know that there was an extra Saint Dragon beside this brat?" With his eyesight, he could naturally see through little Bing Air's original body. He was a little confused. He did not see such a little girl in Yin Nuoxing's memories. Could it be something that happened after the memories were connected? When Feng Air heard the voice, she was also stunned. Then, she seemed to realize something. She clapped her hands and said, "So it's her." Yishi and the others were dumbfounded, and Whitey was also confused. They could only look at Feng Air. The latter smiled faintly and told them what had happened in the ice field. After hearing the whole story, the way everyone looked at Little Bing Air changed slightly. Feng Air and Lachine and Mei Mao's eyes lit up, while Whitey was still looking at Little Bing Air with a strange expression. It pulled its whiskers and muttered something. Well, we have to take care of the child again. Yishi helplessly held her forehead. When she was not paying attention, there was another little girl. While everyone's expressions changed, little Bing Air also blinked her big eyes and looked at everyone. Then, she tilted her little head and turned around. When she saw Yin Nuoxing lying peacefully on the bed, she could not help but blink. She pushed her little hand on his chest and called softly, "Mother." Hearing this somewhat tender voice, everyone's voices came to an abrupt halt. Looking at Bing Er's gaze, and then looking at Yin Nuoxing's appearance, they could not help but burst out laughing. "What are you laughing at?" However, they did not laugh for long before a bright light flashed in midair. The purple night flame burned in midair, and 3 words and a string of ellipses appeared. Everyone was stunned when they saw this. They quickly stopped laughing and looked down. They saw Yin Nuoxing's colorful eyes slowly open. "Mother, mother!" When little Bing Air saw Yin Nuoxing open his eyes, she was very happy. She quickly threw herself into his arms and squeezed his chest with both hands. The corners of Yin Nuoxing's eyes twitched. He sighed and sat up slowly with her in his arms. When he saw everyone staring at him with strange expressions, he was also miserable and did not know what to say for a moment. "Little Bing Air, if you pinch my chest again, it will swell. Also, I'm a man." Yin Nuoxing could not speak and could only send a voice transmission to little Bing Air. He sighed helplessly. Little Bing Air looked up curiously. Her little hand grabbed Yin Nuoxing's long hair and shook it gently. She asked innocently, "Mother, where's Daddy? Why is Daddy missing?" As soon as these words were spoken, Yin Nuoxing suddenly cried out loudly in his heart, and he hurriedly turned around. As expected, he saw Yi Shi and Enlishine with extremely strange expressions, and they seemed as if they'd seen something unbelievable. "Xing Xing, so you have this kind of—" Feng was also very surprised. The shiny red Mei Mao widened her eyes and looked at Yin Nuoxing in surprise. "No." Yin Nuoxing, who knew what she was going to say, used his soul to send a voice transmission and interrupted her. Chapter 705. Yin Nuoxing woke up Xian, who was lying at the side, with her messy emotions. She almost cried when she saw everyone's strange gazes. She then asked Yishi to call Princess Jean in. Then, she slowly told them everything that happened in her soul. Feng Yuing, after everyone heard it, their expressions were solemn. They looked at Yin Nuoxing in disbelief. Clearly, they did not expect Ning Qianxue's words to be true. "You really are Yu Ying's reincarnation." Little White reached out her hand and poked Yin Nuoxing's head. Her tone was filled with disbelief. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. She reached out her hands at lightning speed and pinched Little White's cheeks with all her might, pulling them to the sides. "Ouch, ouch, ouch. Let go." "Ah, I believe you." Whitey let out a blood-curdling scream. Every strand of hair on its slender tail stood on end, as if it was about to explode. "Ling Yuchen, he is Feng Yu Ying's reincarnation, and Little Star, you are the second reincarnation." Princess Jean murmured with a solemn expression. Her pretty face was extremely complicated. Enlishine, Jingyu, and the others looked at each other. Their pretty faces were also solemn. The matter of reincarnation had been confirmed, and it made their minds very confused. Enlishine did not even have the time to care about little Bing Air, who was grabbing her tail like a frisky monkey. Xian and Feng Air's eyes flashed when they heard it. They looked at each other, but did not say anything. Their 4 jade hands gently combed Yin Nuoxing's long hair. However, it was clear that their emotions were in turmoil. I can guarantee that from the mythological era until now, I have never heard of anything related to heaven returning reincarnation. It should be self-created. Moreover, it has not been spread out. No one knows about it, Little White said as she rubbed her cheeks that were red from being pinched. If what Yuin said is true, then you might be able to use the so-called Dao fruit that Ling Yu-chun left behind. You might be able to create a god spirit, Little White said seriously. Yin Nuoxing did not comment on that. According to Feng Yueying's guess, they had quite a big scheme in their first life. Perhaps it was for the sake of stepping into that supreme realm that they set up all of this. Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment, then waved her hand and projected a scene in her memory into the space. Looking at the scene, it was obviously the location of the Flower of Life. Then, she transmitted her voice. Do you know this place? Everyone looked at it attentively for a while and then shook their heads. Empress Jean sighed and said, just by looking at the scenery, you would think that it's the southern plains. However, there are some large plains in every major region. It's impossible to recognize it. The only thing that distinguishes it is the shape of the life flower. I have never seen it before. The realm of the gods is so big, we can't possibly know every place. But I will send a message back to the temple and ask them to look for it. The Golden Queen nodded. Be careful when you send the message. Once this news gets out, the entire realm of the gods will be shaken up. Little White said in a serious tone. They all knew what a fruit of life left behind by a god meant. If it was directly refined, it could even directly create a god. Don't worry. The news about Little Star is basically only spread among the core upper echelons of the 9 temples. The Golden Queen smiled and nodded. She also knew what this news meant. Although Feng Yueying said that only they could refine it, it was better to be safe than sorry. This is a serious matter. We have to contact Little Ning. Little White rubbed his chin and muttered. It's useless. I just tried. Yin Nuoxing shrugged helplessly and continued to transmit her voice. The scepter that Sister Shui gave me can contact her. However, when I just came out, it felt a little blocked. It was as if something was blocking the transmission. Maybe Sister Shui is in a more special space. Hearing this, everyone shook their heads helplessly. If they had the help of a god, their help would be much greater. Why don't I make a trip? With my speed, it would only take a little more than 2 months. With the help of the teleportation gate, it would probably only take a few days. The Silver Snake Demon Emperor suddenly said, also, Honorable God Ning has seen us before. She should have some memory of us. Honorable God was a respectful title for God-level experts. Only God-level experts could bear such a title. If one reached the level of Heavenly God, they would be respectfully called Heavenly God. There's no rush. It won't be too late to make a move after we find that place. If Little Ning is in a place where even her own divine right weapon can't contact her, she probably isn't in the realm of the gods. Little White shook his head. Not in the realm of the gods. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head. Yes, in the information that everyone knows, there's a piece of information that everyone has missed. Little White nodded, then stretched out her slender finger and pointed to the sky, saying, the realm of the gods is distorted by countless space-forbidden spells, making it look no different from an ordinary planet with life. The sun rises and sets again, and so does the moon. However, in reality, very few people know that the realm of the gods is vast and boundless, so it can't have such a short cycle of day and night. This is the result of the distortion of the space-forbidden spells. Of course, there are also time-forbidden spells, which are taboo things. Only the legendary great heavenly god of the first generation could perform them. We have traveled the galaxy and been to the world outside the realm of the gods. Naturally, we know that the realm of the gods is isolated from the outside world. Those energy messages can't be transmitted out, and the outside world can't be transmitted in. It's equivalent to being sealed. You should know the strength of the seal, Little White said casually. In other words, the current state of the realm of the gods is in seclusion. Yin Nuoxing asked in surprise. It wasn't like this a long time ago. At least, the realm of the gods wasn't sealed off during the primordial era and the antiquity era. As for why it sealed off during this era, well, I don't know either. Little White shook her head helplessly. In other words, honored god Ning has gone to the star field. Princess Jean sighed helplessly. She had returned to the realm of the gods for countless years, and she didn't know how the other places in the star field had changed. All right, the 9-deity temple will do its best to help you. You can settle your own problems with peace of mind. Leave the intelligence matters to us. If there's any news, We'll inform you immediately. Princess Jean stretched out her hand and patted Yin Nuoxing's head with a smile. Yin Nuoxing lowered her head and nodded gently. Princess Jean smiled and picked up little Bing Air. She looked at her in surprise and couldn't help but say, "This child's constitution and aptitude." Okay. Then, she looked at Yin Nuoxing and joked, "You're really lucky to have such a powerful daughter." Puffed. Yin Nuoxing spat out a mouthful of medicinal tea. Xian and the other's cheeks twitched. I won't disturb your rest. Recuperate early and return to the academy. Your friend came by a few days ago." Princess Jean smiled and placed little Bing Air in Yin Nuoxing's arms. Then, she yawned and walked out of the room quietly. When Yue Xin and the others saw that he was fine, they smiled at him and followed Princess Jean out of the room. Little White and Yishi also smiled strangely and walked out. The room suddenly became empty. Only Xian and Feng were sitting at the side. After little Bing Air adapted to her body, she couldn't sit still and jumped up and down. "Where are Little Moon and the others?" Yin Nuoxing coughed dryly and broke the silence. Among the people who just came in, he didn't see Sister Liuli and the two girls. Sister Liuli had something to do and went out. You were fiddling with the Saint Devil chessboard. When you were asleep, Lin Sheng and the others helped to send the Saint Devil chessboard over. It was said that Elder Yin Feng and the others gave special permission to use it. They said that it was equivalent to the energy value of our 2 mission rewards. Xian stroked her long hair and continued to comb Yin Nuoxing's colorful hair. Yin Nuoxing, who didn't know what to say, laughed dryly and said, "Are you all okay? I didn't get hurt. I was just exhausted that day. Compared to that, a certain someone who was asleep was more troublesome." Xian looked at him playfully. Then Mei Mao glanced at Feng and said with a smile, "Am I right, Feng?" Feng who was still combing Yin Nuoxing's long hair, was suddenly mentioned. Her jade-like hands stiffened and a blush appeared on her beautiful face. However, it only lasted for a moment before returning to normal. Mei Mao glanced at Yin Nuoxing, who didn't move. Then, as if she didn't have any reaction, she continued combing his long hair and nodded lightly. And Yin Nuoxing glanced at the two girls who seemed a little strange and scratched his head. Little Bing Air seemed to be tired from playing. She ran from the door of the room and jumped onto the bed. Then, she hugged Yin Nuoxing and panted softly. Yin Nuoxing smiled helplessly. He freed his hands and gently stroked little Bing Air's hair. After a long time, he felt her gentle breathing. In this warm scene, little Bing Air fell asleep directly. She's still a child. Yin Nuoxing looked at her sleeping face and couldn't help but chuckle. He gently put her on his lap and covered her with his windbreaker. Then, he raised his head and looked at Xian and Feng. He whispered, "Girl." And Xian and Feng raised their heads at the same time. The two of them were stunned. Then, they looked at each other with blushing faces. Xian smiled and whispered, "What's wrong?" Yin Nuoxing turned his head and looked at them. He blinked his bright eyes and retracted one hand to cover his chest. He closed his bright eyes and felt the impact of his heartbeat. Then he suddenly smiled. Seeing him suddenly smile, Xian and Feng were a little confused. However, they didn't say anything. They could more or less feel his state of mind. "Girl," Yin Nuoxing whispered again, causing the two girls to turn their heads. Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly. His colorful eyes stared at the two beautiful girls. Before they could say anything, he turned his head and hugged Xian fiercely. Yin Nuoxing's sudden action also startled Xian. Her rosy little mouth let out a low cry of surprise. Then, Yin Nuoxing suddenly kissed her little mouth. Xian's delicate body suddenly stiffened. A blush suddenly surged onto her beautiful face. Some shyness and affection flashed through her deep purple eyes. However, there was also a strange feeling mixed in. In her memory, Yin Nuoxing didn't seem to have taken the initiative to kiss her. But soon, she threw this doubt away. Mei Mao was quickly occupied by a misty feeling. Her lily-white hands naturally rested on Yin Nuoxing's shoulders. Their eyes met for a moment. She vaguely seemed to see a deeply hidden affection flash through his eyes. However, That affection was so deeply hidden that Xian, who was a little dizzy, wasn't sure if it was an illusion or not. Feng who was standing to the side, couldn't help but blush when she saw this fiery scene. She quickly turned her face away, not wanting to look at this scene. Her heart was thumping, and her beautiful face was as red as blood. After a full quarter of an hour, Xian was almost out of breath. Only then did Yin Nuoxing gently release his petal-like, soft little mouth. Looking at Xian, whose cheeks were flushed red and looked exceptionally beautiful and alluring, Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly. He rubbed her face with his hands and smiled mysteriously. Turning his head, Yin Nuoxing saw that Feng Er's jade-like neck was dyed red. Even the tips of her delicate ears were red. Amused, he transmitted his voice, "Feng it's about time to turn around." Hearing this, Feng Er's delicate body trembled slightly. The expression on her beautiful face changed slightly. Then, she took a deep breath and slowly suppressed the blush on her face. After a while, she turned her head. However, just as Feng turned her head, she saw Yin Nuoxing's bewitching smile. A sense of unease immediately surged in her heart. Just as she was about to stand up, she was suddenly hugged by two hands. Then, she was forcefully pulled into his embrace, causing her to let out a low moan. Before she could react, her slightly raised vermilion lips were violently bitten. Facing Yin Nuoxing's sudden attack, Feng Er's delicate body instantly stiffened. The blood-red color that she had just suppressed quickly spread up her slender, jade-like neck like a spreading flame. It directly reached her delicate earlobes before stopping. Her jade-like arms were also frantically swinging, pressing against Yin Nuoxing's chest as if she wanted to break free. However, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't exert any strength. She was clearly a divine emperor expert, who was many times stronger than Yin Nuoxing. However, that kind of strength had completely disappeared at this moment. After struggling for a while, she could only helplessly put her hands on his shoulders and squeeze slightly. A feeling that she had never felt before rose from the bottom of her heart. It gathered together like a stream of water and quietly bloomed, illuminating her heart slightly. Feng Er's delicate body became exceptionally hot. Her pair of crystal-like crimson eyes were rippling with a little mist at this moment. Mei Mao imperceptibly flashed across the depths of her heart as a thick wave of affection surged out like a tide. Xian looked at this scene in surprise. She smoothed her slightly messy hair and then looked at this scene with a smile. Although she didn't know what Yin Nuoxing had experienced and what he was thinking, looking at the situation, it seemed that he had slightly let go of his feelings. She didn't understand, and Feng, who was in a daze, was even more confused. The two girls, who were usually incomparably intelligent, couldn't understand at this moment. Even Yin Nuoxing herself couldn't figure it out. That day, when the three of them were wielding the divine sword, because of the resonance of their soul power, borrowing the power of the divine sword to pierce through the void, as well as the soul power of several people, they unintentionally caused a crack to appear in the deepest part of his heart. The two girls just happened to go forward to share the backlash because of their feelings for him, and by a stroke of luck, they managed to leave that mark there. Although it didn't touch the bottom of his heart, there was still some progress. However, since the mark was left, there would be countless opportunities to get closer. The road is long. How could nothing happen? In the world of ice and snow, Feng Yueying murmured with a faint smile. She stretched her back and stood up. She stretched her arms and couldn't help but laugh. How many people can escape from the calamity of love? No matter how hard your heart is, there will always be someone who can touch the softest part of your heart. When that time comes, the iron will turn into stone and the sea and sky will boil just to protect that hard-won result. Life is short. Fall in love, young man. Chapter 706. Yin Nuoxing was also a little surprised by his own actions. It was as if he couldn't understand himself. Sometimes, some of his actions were done according to his heart, and his brain didn't process them. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already done it. Perhaps, he was also hiding his own feelings. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuoxing threw this thought out of his mind. He glanced at Feng Er, whose breathing had become slightly rapid, and smiled faintly. After a few more minutes, he gently let her go. He ran his hands through Feng Er's slightly messy hair, and when he saw her dazed Mei Mao, he couldn't help but lick his lips. As if he hadn't had enough, he lowered his head and kissed her pink lips a few more times. Yin Nuoxing gently held Feng Er's jade-like hands, and their fingers intertwined. He turned around and saw Xian smiling at him and Feng Er. His brain twitched, and he used his remaining right hand to hug her and kiss her again. Xian also looked at Mei Mao in a daze and responded very cooperatively. After a long time, when the two girls' faces were flushed red, Yin Nuoxing finally came back to his senses. He looked at the two of them and couldn't help but smile faintly. This should be the deepest feelings buried in their hearts. There was still a long way to go in the future, and the two of them would always be by his side. What are you laughing at? Xian stroked her long hair and saw Yin Nuoxing staring at her with a faint smile. She also smiled faintly and reached out her other hand to scratch his nose. Nothing, I just feel like laughing. Yin Nuoxing shook his head with a faint smile. You stole Feng Er's first kiss. You have to make it up to her. Ziyin smiled mischievously. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing turned his head and looked at Feng Er, who was blushing because of Ziyin's words. When she saw him looking at her, she was so embarrassed that she almost buried her head in her chest. Yin Nuoxing smiled mischievously. Both of his hands were holding a soft, jade-like hand, and he couldn't free his hands. He could only stretch his neck, open his mouth, and gently blow on Feng Er's earlobe. With a mischievous smile, he transmitted his voice. How do you want me to compensate you? Feng Er let out a lovely moan as her entire body became numb after being blown by the warm wind. When she heard the words that were filled with evil laughter, the embarrassment in her heart soared. The bright redness directly moved down her neck, and even her snow-like small hands were dyed pink. Ahem, I'll stop fooling around. Seeing that Feng Er couldn't take the teasing, Yin Nuoxing coughed dryly and shook his head. Then, he gently let go of their hands and carefully picked up little Bing Er. He flipped over and placed her on the bed. Looking at the two girls, he smiled and said, You've worked hard for the past month. Take a rest. I'll go out and take a look. I'll go back after you've rested. After saying that, he reached out and rubbed their heads, then slowly walked out of the room. But just as he closed the door, Yin Nuoxing's beautiful face suddenly turned bright red. Even the tips of his ears were completely red. He also helplessly smiled bitterly. She really inadvertently caused trouble. After patting his red cheeks to suppress the blush, Yin Nuoxing breathed a sigh of relief and slowly walked to the other rooms in the mansion. As the door was gently closed, Xian and Feng Er breathed a sigh of relief. When they heard the sound, they looked at each other again. Then, a little embarrassed, their restless hearts slowly relaxed. Feng Er, what do you think is wrong with little Star? Xian asked softly. She lowered her head and gently stroked little Bing Er's blue-blonde hair. I don't know. Xing has never done such a thing to me. Feng Er and Mei Mao's eyes flickered. They also didn't know what to say. They pressed their hands on their chest. Their hearts were still beating rapidly at this moment. You also like little Star, right? Xian rested her chin on her hand. Mei Mao looked at Feng Er. Seeing the slightly complicated expression on her face, she couldn't help but chuckle. Feng Er's expression changed slightly. Some shyness flashed across Mei Mao's eyes. Then there was joy, and also a little confusion. After a long while, she finally made a sound as soft as a mosquito. Haha. Seeing the changes in Feng Er's expression, Xian couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. After a while, she pretended to be angry and said, He got off too easy. Hearing this, Feng Er tilted her head. Seeing her playful appearance, her beautiful eyes moved slightly, and she said with a faint smile, Ziyin is the one. Isn't this the scene you've been waiting for a long time? You also said that you wouldn't care about the others around him. That's what I said. Ziyan's pretty face turned slightly red. She nodded and muttered, "I'm jealous of." Feng'er smiled slightly. Although Xian said so, there wasn't much emotion in the latter's eyes. It seemed that, as she said at the beginning, she didn't care too much. She didn't care about herself. She didn't care about anything. She just silently said in her heart, "Stupid Xingxing." Yin Nuoxing, who was wandering in the mansion, suddenly sneezed. She raised her head in confusion, wiped her nose, paused for a moment, and then slowly walked around again. But after walking around for a long time, she felt a little helpless. The huge mansion seemed very deserted. Yishi was in closed-door training to consolidate her breakthrough to the God-Emperor realm. She had gone to the mountains to undergo her tribulation. The Golden Crown Princess, and Lachine, and the Empress had left to gather information. Yuan Shi and Nightmare were also in closed-door training. Little Moon and Yuer had left a note and disappeared. In another secret room, there was a brilliant golden light surging. She could feel the power of talismans surging in it. Standing outside the secret room, Yin Nuoxing scratched her head and opened her evil spirit eye. She looked inside and saw a huge furnace burning with flames. She could also see a green, crystal-like object spinning in the furnace. In the flames, green talismans were constantly being calcined by the flames. Finally, they surged into the green crystal. In other parts of the furnace, she could see some materials that looked like Xian crystals and contained life aura. Those talismans were formed by the energy of these materials. Oh, this is alchemy. It seems to be similar to alchemy, but also completely different. Yin Nuoxing looked at the talismans attentively and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. A moment later, he turned his gaze around. There was an exquisite and slender figure beside the stove. Her black dress was drenched in sweat, tightly sticking to her delicate body, accentuating her impressive curves. Her willow-like waist was tightly bound by a belt, causing it to be so small that it could not be held with a single hand. Yin Nuoxing stole a few glances and then turned her gaze away. Yin was currently closing her mouth tightly. Fragrant sweat flowed down her forehead like water, along her slender jade neck, and fell into her dress. Her serene and beautiful face naturally revealed a sense of emptiness. But at this moment, her beautiful face was completely pale. Her pearly white teeth were tightly biting her red lips. The energy gushing out of her delicate body had begun to become somewhat intermittent. Alchemy and alchemy are both activities that exhaust one's physical strength. Qin Lass seems to be unable to hold on any longer. Although I don't understand alchemy, from the energy fluctuations, it should be of high quality. With a lass's devil rank, 5 seals, Yin Nuoxing naturally used his evil spirit to analyze. When he saw Qin Yan's cultivation realm, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He hadn't returned for 2 to 3 months, so how could she have already obtained 5 seals? However, the energy of 5 seals of the 7th revolution isn't enough. Yin Nuoxing scratched his head as he shook his head with a bitter smile. It seemed that he had brought Qin Yin, Yuan Shi, and the rest all over the world, which had caused their cultivation progress to fall behind by quite a bit. If not, Yin Nuoxing didn't believe that they would be inferior to the top 3 on the devil rankings of the Yuanguan Academy. Just as he was inwardly muttering to himself, a violent flame aura suddenly came from the secret chamber, causing Yin Nuoxing to be startled. He hurriedly emptied his mind and focused his attention on the secret chamber. In the secret chamber, he could see boundless energy emerging from the ground, transforming into billowing milky white flames. That was the dragon vein of Xiaoguang City. Qin Yin possessed the metal element, so she had to borrow the dragon vein fire for alchemy. Just as Yin Nuoxing was absent-minded for a moment, the dragon vein fire suddenly went berserk. The energy that had been suppressing them seemed to have weakened a lot, which caused the flames to go berserk. However, this didn't last for long. Yin Nuoxing felt an even more powerful mental energy completely suppressing it within the furnace. The flames that had already erupted from the furnace were once again withdrawn. Seeing this, Yin Nuoxing let out a sigh of relief. However, just as he thought that it was safe, the green crystal suddenly erupted with an abnormally bright radiance. The green runes that were continuously pouring and also suddenly went berserk, causing his expression to freeze. Bang! A series of muffled sounds rang out in the furnace. The previously stable runes began to tremble uncontrollably. Even the green crystal trembled violently, as if it had lost control. Qin Yin also sensed the situation. Mei Mao abruptly opened her eyes. She wiped the sweat from her face with her jade-like hand and clenched her teeth. The black, gem-like, Mei Mao was filled with unwillingness. At this moment, the mental energy in her mind poured out without any regard for anything else. She even canceled her own defenses. Under the suppression of the enormous mental energy, the furnace that had been on the verge of going berserk abruptly stabilized. The turbulent dragon vein fire and green crystal calmed down once again, causing Qin Yin to let out a sigh of relief. Outside the door, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but break out in cold sweat for her. This girl was too reckless. If the furnace had exploded just now, she would definitely have suffered serious injuries from the backlash in a situation where she didn't have any defenses. Mei Mao stared intently at the situation within the furnace. After observing for a while, it seemed that she didn't discover any other problems. Qin Yin let out a sigh of relief. Her jade-like hand formed a seal slightly. The mental energy that poured out from her body firmly suppressed the green runes and pulled them all into the green crystal. Only when the runes were completely withdrawn into the crystal did she let out a sigh of relief. Buzz. However, just as she let out a sigh of relief, a buzzing sound suddenly penetrated through the secret chamber. Yin Nuoxing, who had just turned her head, was also alarmed. She turned her head and saw that the stable milky white flame within the furnace had suddenly become crazy. It erupted like a volcano. Qin Yin, who was the closest to the furnace, naturally also felt this activity. Mei Mao paused and hurriedly threw herself into the furnace. The milky white flame that soared to the sky seemed to have been condensed for a very long time. At this moment, it was the time for it to completely erupt. This activity was just like a bomb that had been detonated in a sealed place. Flames and shock waves that had nowhere to escape surged out from the mouth of the furnace. When she saw the milky white flame that surged out from the furnace in all directions, Qin Yin's pretty face turned slightly pale. She hurriedly maneuvered the little remaining demonic qi and mental energy in her body and swiftly agglomerated into an energy barrier in front of her. The energy barrier appeared somewhat dim and not solid. After a long period of refining, she had reached the stage where she was like a lamp that had run out of oil. At this moment, this was all the defense that she could take out in her hurried state. Crack! The moment the milky white flame shockwave came into contact with the dim barrier, it smashed through it with an unstoppable force, shattering it into mottled white fragments that filled the sky. Qin Yin, who was hiding behind the barrier, was completely exposed to its monstrous power. If it were any other time, she would definitely not be afraid of the backlash from the flames. However, at this moment, she no longer had the slightest bit of strength to resist. Under the impact of the berserk flames, she could only close her beautiful eyes in despair. The surging milky white flame appeared to be in an all-encompassing manner as it mercilessly swept towards Qin Yin. Under this frightening force, the already powerless Qin Yin could only tightly shut Mei Mao. However, just as she was prepared to use her physical body to forcefully resist the backlash from the flame suddenly froze. The milky white flame trembled violently and its glow completely dimmed. That appearance was as though it had seen the most frightening thing. Subsequently, it suddenly shrank back into the furnace within a breath's time. Chapter 707. The flames that blotted out the sky and covered the earth contained an extremely violent energy. That energy was enough to seriously injure anyone who was caught off guard by the flames. Qin Yin was already prepared to withstand the impact, but just as she was waiting anxiously for the flames to engulf her, the flames suddenly dissipated. "Little girl, what are you doing?" Qin Yin was also taken aback by the lack of backlash from the blazing flames. Then, she heard a reproachful voice. The voice was as gentle as the wind, like that of a 16-year-old girl. It sounded a little unfamiliar, but at the same time familiar. Furthermore, the voice came directly from her heart, not from her ears. Qin Yin opened her eyes in astonishment. Then, she saw a slender figure half squatting in front of her. The figure was wearing a loose black windbreaker that dragged on the ground. The figure's long, colorful hair was like clouds and silk, flowing with colors. It was gorgeous and lustrous, and there was a trace of anger on the figure's cute and delicate face. Even though she was angry, she still looked very beautiful. The figure's eyes, which were as clear and pure as glass, stared straight at Qin Yin. Staring into those bright eyes, one could feel the emptiness of nature and the eternity of the star domain. It was a pair of very beautiful eyes, comparable to a priceless work of art. It had to be said that this little girl was really very beautiful. Whether it was her appearance or her ethereal temperament, even Qin Yin felt a little moved when she saw her. However, she was very curious at this moment. Who was this girl? The entire residence was surrounded by Yi Shi's protective array. Without special skills, one should not be able to enter. Moreover, what did she call her just now? Little girl? This girl looked to be around 13 or 14 years old. Why did she call her little girl? However, Qin Yin still felt that something was not right, especially that head of colorful hair. It slowly overlapped with the figure hidden in her heart. She only came to her senses at this moment and called out hesitantly, "Young Master Yin? Who else do you think it is?" Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. During the few seconds of hesitation just now, he had seen the shock, astonishment, and confusion in Qin Yin's eyes. He instantly understood what was going on and couldn't help but let out a sigh. However, he did not pay much attention to it. After all, he was used to it. He extended a slender finger and lightly flicked Qin Yin's smooth forehead. Then, after a sigh, he transmitted his voice. "What are you doing? When the flames went berserk a minute ago, you clearly could have saved some energy to retract the flames and give up on this alchemy. There's not enough energy left, but you stubbornly insisted on continuing the refinement. If I didn't come today, wouldn't I have been burned alive?" After being flicked on the forehead like he was treating a child, and his tone had a hint of reprimand, Qin Yan's pretty face blushed slightly. A trace of panic imperceptibly flowed through Mei Mao's eyes, but she returned to normal after a moment. She lowered her head and softly said, "I've already failed many times. It's rare for me to have a sign of success this time. How can I give up? In the first test, there's a new requirement for me. Before I advance to the 7th seal of the devil rank, I have to be able to refine top-grade, high-grade gems. And this..." Qin Yin sighed and waved her jade-like hand. A green crystal floated out of the furnace. The majestic aura of life made Yin Nuoxing slightly surprised. Ding! Extending her slender finger and gently flicking the crystal, Qin Yin bitterly smiled and said, "This is only a top-grade, high-grade gem. There's a long way to go before it's a top-grade, high-grade gem." Yin Nuoxing's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Seeing her tired expression, he didn't know what to say. After a moment of hesitation, he let out a sigh and slowly reached out his hands. They circled around Qin Yan's back and legs, and before she could react, he gently lifted her off the ground. "Ah!" Startled by Yin Nuoxing's sudden movement, Qin Yin let out a cry of surprise as she reflexively wrapped her arms around Yin Nuoxing's neck. When she came to her senses, she hurriedly let go of Yin Nuoxing's hand, and her pretty face instantly turned bright red. The blush on her pretty face lit up the entire room. "Put me down. I can walk on my own." Qin Yin struggled slightly as she placed her jade-like hands on Yin Nuoxing's chest and tried to push him away. However, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't exert any strength. Her pretty face became even redder, and even her voice became as soft as a mosquito's. "Oh!" Yin Nuoxing raised his head slightly, and then transmitted his voice very seriously. "Then jump down by yourself." Hearing this, Qin Yan's delicate body trembled. Mei Mao's eyes were filled with some fog. This guy clearly knew that she had no strength, yet he still said this. Wasn't he bullying her? Lowering his head, Yun Nuoxing saw that she was blushing and did not say anything. He also sighed and did not say anything. He directly carried her and walked out. When Qin Yin saw this, she knew that it was useless to protest. She could only give up. After hesitating for a while, she raised her jade-like arms and gently wrapped them around his neck. The journey back to her room was not very long. Yin Nuoxing also took this time to talk about the important things that happened in the past 3 months. Qin Yin was slightly absent-minded. When she listened, she also responded very mechanically. However, after responding, she seemed to have reacted and hurriedly said something else. This made Yin Nuoxing feel very awkward. He thought that she did not want to hear him talk about things, so he had no choice but to shut up. After the voice in her heart was completely cut off, Qin Yin was slightly flustered. Mei Mao raised her head slightly. When she saw Yun Nuoxing's helpless face, her pretty face turned even redder. A crimson red spread all the way down her jade-like neck like a burning cloud. Because of the strange atmosphere, both of them shut up. Although they knew why Yin Nuoxing only used telepathy, they felt even more awkward at this moment. It was only a short distance of about 100 meters, but it felt like they had walked 1,000 miles. However, no matter how long 1,000 miles was, there was still an end. Not long after, Yin Nuoxing found Qin Yan's room. He squeezed the door open with his back and placed her firmly on the bed. After thinking for a while, he threw a scroll to her and gave her a few reminders before leaving safely. After watching Yun Nuoxing close the door and the sound of his footsteps gradually fade away, Qin Yan's breathing became rapid. Her heart was thumping wildly like a deer, causing her head to feel slightly numb. She quickly patted her chest with her jade-like hand and took a few deep breaths. Only then did she calm down a little. Suppressing her restless heartbeat, Qin Yin smiled bitterly. Mei Mao looked at the scroll in her hand with a complicated expression. Her pupils shrank slightly. After a while, she let out a long sigh and casually put it away. She slowly sat cross-legged on the bed and recovered the huge amount of energy she had just consumed. After walking out of Qin Yan's room, Yin Nuoxing turned around and looked at the tightly shut door. He sighed and shook his head lightly. Then, he lifted his feet and walked towards the main hall of the residence in boredom. Ping ling pang lang. Bang! Just as he walked to the door, before he even pushed it open, he heard a series of banging sounds coming from the main hall. It was as if a few hundred kilograms of scrap metal had been knocked together. Among the chaotic sounds, there were 2 exclamations. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Were they Little Moon and you? Bang! Although he didn't know what was going on inside, Yin Nuoxing couldn't care less when he heard another banging sound. He kicked the door open, and just as he stepped in, he was stunned. The main hall was very messy. The tables, chairs, and sofas that were originally neatly placed had been put away. In a vast main hall, there was a large pile of copper and iron wares that were lying around. In one corner, there was even a pile of scrap metal that was piled up into a small mountain. Yin Nuoxing looked at the pile of scrap metal in the main hall with a dumbfounded expression. The iron scraps and copper scraps were piled up to the height of his calf. When he kicked the door open, a large pile of things poured out of the main hall, and a series of banging sounds rang out. Ouch! 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 Just as he was stunned, a pile of copperware suddenly wriggled in the middle of the main hall. There was even a sound that rang out. He quickly looked over and hurriedly walked over. The wriggling pile of copperware suddenly broke open, and copperware flew everywhere. Then he saw 2 petite figures struggling to stand up in that area. Their white dress and green dress fluttered in the wind. There was also a slender ponytail with a crescent hair accessory. Other than Little Moon, who else could it be? The little fairy dancing in the white dress was naturally Yuer, who had been inseparable from Little Moon since some time ago. Yuer, what are you doing? Yin Nuoxing wrinkled his nose. He slightly released the power of the stars and pushed away the copper wares that were piled up all over the floor. His footsteps were much faster, and he soon reached the 2 of them. Big brother, Brother Yin. When Little Moon and Yuer saw who it was, they were first shocked. However, when they saw that it was Yin Nuoxing, they heaved a sigh of relief. Then they giggled and gently called out to him. Their jade-like hands pushed away the pile of copperwares. The two of them directly pounced on him and acted coquettishly for a while. Yin Nuashing smiled gently and reached out to rub the two girls' heads and faces. However, when he lowered his head, he saw that the two girls' clothes were messy and even slightly damaged. Their exposed, jade-like arms and slender legs were also bruised. He could not help but be stunned and frowned slightly. What happened to the two of you? Yin Nuashing's heart ached as he grabbed Little Moon's arm and gently rolled up her sleeve. There was a palm-sized bruise on her delicate arm. His heart ached when he saw it. Ah, this is... Little Moon wanted to pull her arm out in a panic, but Yin Nuashing held it tightly. When she saw him staring at it attentively, Mei Mao also felt shy and nervous. She was afraid that Yin Nuashing would scold her. Yin Nuashing glanced at her and did not say anything. The wood elements in his body surged slightly and very gently entered Little Moon's arm. A rich vitality filled the air. The bruise also quietly faded under the gentle touch of the wood elements. In just a few breaths, it returned to its original snow-white appearance. After treating the injuries on Little Moon's body, Yin Nuashing pulled Yu into his arms without any explanation. This girl's shoulder was even swollen. Seeing this, Yin Nuashing's heart ached to death. He also hurriedly treated her injuries. Seeing that the injuries on her body had recovered in a short while, Yu's beautiful eyes flickered gently. Soon after, her mouth parted into a smile. She stood on her tiptoes, and her soft red lips gently touched Yin Nuashing's face. With a lovely smile, she said, "Thank you, Big Brother Yin." When Little Moon saw this, she exclaimed softly. After thinking for a moment, Mei Mao suddenly stood on her tiptoes and stretched out her jade-like arms. Under Yin Nuashing's shocked gaze, she directly hugged his neck. Then her slightly curled red lips imprinted on his lips in the most impulsive way. "Ah, Sister Yu, you broke the rules." Seeing this scene, Yu's pretty face turned red. She hurriedly stretched out her jade-like hands and pulled Yin Nuashing and Little Moon away before they could react. She angrily shouted, "We agreed not to lay our hands on Big Brother Yin. You broke the rules." Only then did Little Moon realize what she had done. Her beautiful face suddenly turned red, and she quickly covered her blushing face with her jade-like hands. "Lay our hands on you." When Yin Nuashing came to his senses, he sensitively caught something. His cheeks twitched, and then he narrowed his eyes slightly. His body exuded the majesty of an elder brother. He looked at the two naughty girls with a dangerous gaze and said with an evil smile, "What did you guys agree on?" When they sensed that Yin Nuashing's aura had become dangerous, Little Moon and Yu suddenly shivered. Two pairs of Mei Mao looked at Yin Nuashing, who was like a great demon king, in horror. They couldn't help but scream. Their legs went soft, and they knelt on the ground. They trembled like frightened little animals, and their eyes turned misty. "Saint Devil chessboard?" Yin Nuashing took the item that Yu handed to him carefully and lowered his head to take a look. It was a circular chessboard. On the surface of the chessboard was a yin-yang pattern. However, the original white color of the yin-yang pattern was now occupied by gold. The other half was black, and it was extremely dark. The darkness seemed to be wriggling. Yes. Brother Lin Sheng and Sister Mingyu sent it to us. They said that the elders allowed it. They used the mission rewards of Brother Yun and Sister Xian to offset it." Yu nodded her head gently. She held Yin Nuashing's arm and shook it. She even rubbed her face against his chest. Yin Nuashing could not bear to teach them a lesson. He did not even scold them. He only gently reminded them twice. This made the two little girls feel as if they had been pardoned. They nodded their heads vigorously like little chicks pecking at rice. At the same time, they happily stuck out their tongues. The big brother in their hearts was this good old man who had never taught them a lesson. This isn't a weapon. It looks like something special from ancient times." Yin Nuashing flipped the chessboard over and over again. There was a galaxy on the back of the chessboard. It seemed to point to the vast and boundless sea of stars. Yes. The Saint Devil chessboard is an item. not a weapon. This item has a certain reputation in the demon world. It is the inherited item of the Saint Devil tribe. However, it was lost with the destruction of the Saint Devil tribe in ancient times. As Uter spoke, she stretched out her slender finger and drew circles on Yun Nuashing's stomach. She said softly, the Saint Devil tribe was one of the strongest tribes at that time. They had never fallen out of the top 10 tribes in the demon world. However, they were much weaker than our family. Our family had always occupied the second place. Forever second place. Yin Nuashing originally wanted to say this. However, when he saw Yuer's excited expression, he didn't say it. He smiled and rubbed her head. Then, he indicated for her to continue. Yes, the decline of the Saint Devil tribe was due to their failure in attacking the divine world. At that time, the proud and arrogant Saint Devil tribe didn't listen to the proposal of the demon world's parliament. They rushed into the divine world alone. In the end, they were beaten to a pulp by the experts of the divine world. Only a few of their tribe members managed to escape. Yin Nuashing and Little Moon couldn't help but blush with shame. They dared to attack the divine world alone. Should they say that the Saint Devil tribe was proud and arrogant? Or was it because they were too confident in themselves? However, from this, one could see the strength of the Saint Devil tribe. In history, there had never been a tribe that dared to attack the divine world alone. The battle strength of the entire tribe must have reached a certain level for them to dare to do such a thing. After that, there's nothing much to talk about. The old haunt of the Saint Devil tribe was cleaned up by the other experts of the demon world. However, no one found the Saint Devil chessboard. For this reason, the old haunt of the Saint Devil tribe was dug up several thousand layers. Every year, there would be a big project to dig up that place. Yuer said tenderly. This is it. Yin Nuashing raised the Saint Devil chessboard in his hand. He was somewhat puzzled. Chapter 708. The Saint Devil chessboard surface was like a yin-yang diagram, while the back was a vast star field. As it swayed, it seemed that the star field was also shaking. The star field was filled with an ancient and eternal aura, but the yin-yang diagram was completely silent. There was no luster, as if it was just a simple picture. We couldn't find this chessboard at the old site of the Saint Devil clan. Many people in the demon world speculated that it might have been lost in the Myriad God world after the Saint Devil clan was defeated. However, the Myriad God world was so huge, and the demon world had never conquered the Myriad God world, so this matter was gradually forgotten. The people of the Myriad God world might also know about this Saint Devil chessboard, but they couldn't open it, so it wasn't very famous. Yuer smiled tenderly as she shook Yin Nuashing's arm, while her other hand gently took the chessboard. Mei Mao's eyes flickered slightly. So what's the use of this thing? Yin Nuashing asked curiously. Something that could make the entire demon world think about it must be very useful. As for why it fell into the hands of the Myriad God world and was unknown, it should be because there were some protective measures that prevented the people of the Myriad God world from opening it. Yuer laughed tenderly. She winked at Mei Mao and gave Little Moon a look. The latter had just recovered from her shyness, and when she saw the look, hesitation appeared on her face. However, when she saw Yin Nuashing's curious look, her hesitation disappeared in an instant. She nodded and gently held the latter's arm. Yin Nuashing tilted his head and looked at the two girls strangely. The two pairs of Mei Mao's eyes were as bright as stars, and they were filled with playfulness. Looking at them, he felt a little uneasy. What are these two girls up to now? Yuer's little mouth moved slightly, and a demonic sound came out of her cherry mouth. The syllables were very strange, and it didn't seem like an ordinary language. Yin Nuashing couldn't understand it for a long time. However, he didn't need to understand it. When Yuer chanted the demonic sound, Yin Nuashing saw the yin-yang diagram on the Saint Devil chessboard seem to come alive. It emitted bursts of light and immediately began to revolve around the center. The change of the yin-yang diagram made Yin Nuashing slightly narrowed his eyes. Just as he raised his vigilance, Yuer's thumb lightly brushed across her index finger, and a drop of bright red blood. Red blood. At first glance, the blood was no different from that of an ordinary person's blood, but there were two billowing waves of demonic energy surging around it, as if it was a demon's blood. Beep! The drop of demonic blood landed on the yin-yang diagram, and a small flower of blood splattered. Then, the surface of the yin-yang diagram rippled like a mirror, and circles of ripples continuously spread out. After the drop of blood landed on the yin-yang diagram, the yin-yang diagram suddenly enlarged a lot. The dazzling black and gold light made Yin Nuoxing habitually close his eyes. After a long time, when the light gradually dimmed, Yin Nuoxing's eyes rolled twice, and only then did he open his eyes. When he saw the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned, and a strange sound came from his throat. What appeared in front of him was a vast and boundless starry sky. Various colors of light lingered in the galaxy, and the starlight that filled the sky couldn't illuminate this eternal night background. Under this colorful starry sky, there were countless huge meteorites and rubble scattered around Yin Nuoxing, covering an area of thousands of miles. Those rubble and meteorites wandered aimlessly in this starry sky, spinning around this meteorite belt. Occasionally, they would collide and send another huge rock into the pitch-black starry sky, becoming another eternal wanderer in the boundless starry sky. This is really spectacular. Looking at this starry sky that couldn't be any more real, Yin Nuoxing finally couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Whether it was the starry sky background or the group of meteorites, they all looked incomparably real. He even reached out to touch a huge rock not far away, and an extremely cold temperature spread from his palm, causing him to shiver violently. No wonder it was so real, it was really a rock. Where were you guys? Yin Nuoxing shouted subconsciously, and then he was a little surprised. Since he could speak, he shouldn't be in a physical state, but a spiritual body or a spiritual body. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but scratch his head when he didn't get any response after shouting. The two girls disappeared after he came in. Could it be that they were teleported away? Boom! However, his doubts only lasted for a moment, when he heard a roar coming from afar, and it also stunned him. Only then did he realize that one shouldn't be able to speak in the starry sky, and there was probably a mystery in this place. Yin Nuoxing turned his gaze to the direction of the roar. Not long after, he saw a huge cold rock among the meteorites, and it was hurtling towards him. That meteorite was as big as a loft, and its huge size and speed made Yin Nuoxing feel a little oppressed, and he subconsciously took a few steps back. "Brother Yin, come up." Yin Nuoxing's bright eyes paused just as he stepped back. He looked up and saw Yuer and Little Moon hurriedly waving at him from the meteorite that was rushing towards him. He was stunned for a moment, but he didn't hesitate. When the meteorite was not far away from him, he gently jumped up and landed on the meteorite. For small hands uniformly supported Yin Nuoxing to sit down. Yuer directly stuck to his body, and then said in a charming voice, "The Saint Devil chessboard contains a real starry sky, and it's not man-made." It said that the experts of the Saint Devil clan forcibly moved a starry sky into the chessboard. Moreover, this starry sky is very vast, and it's very easy to get lost. If you want to go deep into other places, you have to rely on the meteorites that are roaming in the starry sky. However, we came in as spiritual bodies, so we can leave at any time, and we don't have to worry about getting lost, Yuer said with a smile. When Yin Nuoxing heard this, he was a little shocked. To be able to move a starry sky into the chessboard, he was afraid that it was an existence of a high-level god. Perhaps it was an expert who was close to the level of a god, like the owner of the maze. We, the people of the demon world, pay attention to the cultivation of the spirit. We don't care about the soul, so we can't control the elemental power between heaven and earth. Even if we rely on our powerful spirit, we can only borrow a little bit of it, Yuer said softly. Yin Nuoxing nodded. The experts of the divine world paid attention to the comprehensive power of cultivation. The body, spirit, and soul were all involved. If they didn't do this, they wouldn't be able to control the elemental power. After all, it was one of the energies that created heaven and earth. In the dark starry sky, huge meteorites were rampaging, and small stones were sent flying as they flew endlessly through the starry sky. In the starry sky, there was no concept of time. They could only vaguely feel the passage of time, but they didn't know how much time had passed. The journey was boring and monotonous. The meteorites flew very fast, but in this vast starry sky, it seemed very slow. Along the way, they would occasionally see some balls of light. Yin Nuoxing opened his evil spirit eye and looked over. Within the balls of light, he saw palaces and mountains that rose from the ground. It was obvious that they had been moved here by someone. Those were thrown into the Saint Demon chessboard by the experts of the Saint Demon clan. It could be said that they touched the deepest foundation of the clan. Sister Yuer and I have seen some of the palaces. There are very powerful restrictions. We have to obtain the right to control the Saint Demon chessboard before we can touch those things, Yuer and Mei Mao said, looking at those balls of light. Although he didn't know how deep the so-called foundation was, Yin Nuoxing could roughly guess. The position of the Saint Demon clan, when placed in the myriad god realm, was estimated to be in the ranks of the transcendent forces. It might even be similar to the 8 ancient families. Their foundation must be very strong. If news were to spread, the great army of the demon realm would probably come out in full force. Not long after, a huge star appeared in front of them. The sea was blue, and the land was filled with greenery. It gave off a primitive and natural feeling. The meteorite that Yin Nuoxing and the others were riding was also rushing towards the huge star. The corner of Yin Nuoxing's eyes twitched. Although the meteorite they were riding was very big, it was as small as an ant in front of the huge star in front of them. It was inconspicuous, just like the rocks that were hit by the meteorite earlier. But this time, it seemed that they were going to hit the huge star. Seeing that something was wrong, Yin Nuoxing hugged the 2 girls tightly with both hands. With a stomp of his feet, he left the huge meteorite and floated into the space of the star field. As for the meteorite, due to this stomp and the gravitational pull of the star, its speed became many times faster. It directly rushed into the atmosphere of the star and burned with bright flames. There was even a long tail of flames behind it. It was extremely gorgeous. Yin Nuoxing thought that the meteorite would crash into the ground of the star. But she didn't expect that the meteorite would burn up in the atmosphere before it even got close to the ground. Not even a bit of it was left. There is also a restriction here. Yin Nuoxing glanced at it and said softly. Yuer nodded. Mei Mao looked around nearby, then pulled her and Little Moon with her jade-like hand and jumped onto another huge meteorite that brushed past the star. The meteorite was very close to the star and almost fell into the atmosphere. There was a long tail of energy behind it, but in the end, it didn't fall into the star. It just flew close to it and rushed into the space of the star field again. It took Yin Nuoxing and the others and rushed into the unknown space. In the following time, Yin Nuoxing and the others repeatedly changed meteorites. In fact, Yuer didn't know how big the star field was or what was in its specific location. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to go through so much trouble and rely on meteorites to try their luck. Perhaps they were lucky. After 3 days of boring travel, they finally saw a very strange place. The blue light emitted from the distant star field dyed this place blue. In the center of that area, there were meteorite fragments that carried energy flying out. The moment these fragments left, they would turn into small meteorites and charge into the star field, becoming a member of the endless meteorites that roamed the star field. We're here. I'm so tired. Seeing the area covered by energy, Yuer jumped up in surprise. Then, she rubbed her small waist and mumbled to herself. It had been hard on them for the past 3 days. I was your pillow and doll, but you didn't say anything. You're the only one who doesn't have a reason to say that, right? Yin Nuoxing and Little Moon said almost at the same time. The former was helpless, while the latter was a little dissatisfied. In the past 3 days, Yin Nuoxing took them to change meteorites. Little Moon was a little more obedient, while Yuer pestered Yin Nuoxing all the time. She jumped up and down to play, making him feel bitter and loving at the same time. However, Yun Nuoxing's little face was a little resentful. When these two sentences came out, Yun Nuoxing was also stunned. She looked at the blushing little moon with a strange gaze. Yu also glanced at her with a grin, then jumped into the latter's arms and played with her while laughing. Yun Nuoxing stole a glance at the erotic scene of the two girls whispering into each other's ears. She coughed dryly, and her pretty face was a little red. However, she didn't think too much about it. Her colorful eyes quickly turned to the area where the energy was scattered. In the middle of the energy fog, she could vaguely see an altar. The altar was only a few meters tall and 1,000 feet wide. It was a neat, round platform, and there were stone pillars erected at the edge. Clusters of flames rose from the stone pillars. There was only a gap on the round platform that allowed people to climb onto the altar. It was stable and motionless, and the swaying flames were also in the same motion. It was as if it had always been like this since ancient times, and there had never been any changes. Chapter 709. That's the center of the Saint Devil chessboard. There's a wisp of the Saint Devil chessboard soul. You'll be able to pass the test, Yu said softly as she pointed at the altar. Yun Nuoxing also looked over, but he didn't act rashly. At this moment, he was only his spiritual body and not his actual body. The distance of a few thousand feet made him feel pressured and uneasy. Swoosh! Swoosh! Just as the uneasiness in his heart rose, pillars of light suddenly descended from the sky and landed at the outermost area of the energy region. Soon after, bronze statues that were flickering with a metallic luster appeared at the outermost area of the energy region. When he saw these bronze statues, the corners of Yun Nuoxing's eyes twitched slightly. Needless to say, he knew what to do next. However, he could not help but feel a little embarrassed, especially when he saw the number and sensed the danger coming from the bronze statues. The corners of his eyes twitched even more. These bronze statues were over 10 feet tall, and there were tens of thousands of them. They were densely packed together and gave Yun Nuoxing and the other two an extremely strong pressure. Just standing outside made them feel nervous. Moreover, based on their auras, each bronze statue could be regarded as a demon rank 5 or 6 seals expert. With tens of thousands of them piled up, even a demigod expert would be crushed to death, let alone those powerful existences in the depths. Could these be the bronze pieces in the hall? Yun Nuoxing blinked his eyes and couldn't help but ask when he suddenly recalled the large pile of bronze pieces he saw when he entered the hall. When we couldn't defeat them and wanted to leave, those big guys chased after us. However, once they leave the Saint Devil chessboard, they will turn into scrap metal. Yu gently rubbed Yun Nuoxing's arm and giggled. Big brother Yun, once we enter this place, from the moment the bronze statues appear, our auras will be locked onto. As for how strong the bronze statues are, it completely depends on one's realm. Yu and elder sister Yu saw bronze statues at the 9th level of the immortal rank. Big brother Yun will probably see bronze statues at the 3rd or 4th level of the devil rank. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing calmly shook his head and said, no, 5 or 6 seals. Moreover, they're all 8 or 9 seals. Hearing this, Yu and Little Moon were startled and then smiled bitterly. They only had to cross 1 or 2 levels to fight, but Yun Nuoxing crossed 3 or 4 levels. Brother Yun, although you can leave the Saint Devil chessboard, if you're locked onto by the bronze statues, you can only escape if you find the exit. Yu winked at Mei Mao, and a sly look flashed across her eyes. Her chuckling words made Yun Nuoxing's expression freeze. What the hell? Little Moon laughed dryly when she saw Yun Nuoxing's dumbfounded look. She tugged at his sleeve and muttered, from now on, this star field will be a battlefield until we leave. Yun Nuoxing was dumbfounded and then glared fiercely at Yu. The latter shuddered from the glare, but she didn't escape. Instead, she hurriedly pressed her petite body into his arms and acted cute, as if she was acting coquettishly. Yun Nuoxing sighed in exasperation. He cupped her little face with both hands and scolded softly. You little girl who cheated me. All right, Just do me a favor, big brother." Seeing this, Yu hugged his arm with her jade-like hands and used that sweet and sickening voice to drag out the last syllable, causing Little Moon's delicate body to tremble and a few layers of goosebumps to appear on her delicate skin. Okay. I'll help." Yin Nuashing sighed helplessly. He really couldn't control this little girl. Yu was overjoyed when she heard him agree. She lifted her pretty face and rubbed against his arms with all her might, messing up his clothes. In the end, Little Moon couldn't stand it anymore and hurriedly pulled her away. Only then did she stop. Yin Nuashing looked at the bronze statue army, and the corners of his eyes twitched. He said he wanted to help, but he didn't have so many divine artifacts to use if it was just a spiritual body. If it was a spiritual body, he could still use the Nether Void Sword and Ling Hong Sword. However, it was just a spiritual body. That would be troublesome. Crack. The bronze statues completely ignored Yin Nuashing's contemplation. Not long after they appeared, they lifted their feet in unison. The vast aura that gathered together swept out like a storm, oppressing Yin Nuashing and the other two from all directions, causing them to tremble slightly. Huff! Yin Nuashing regained his senses when he sensed the powerful aura. He clenched his hands, and mental energy surged out, forming two huge green mental energy swords that he held tightly in his hands. A moment later, he said to the two girls beside him, "Stay close to me. We'll fight as we move. Don't stop. Why are you thinking so much? If you don't cower, you'll fight." "Okay." Little Yu and Yu also nodded firmly. They gently inhaled a breath of air, and their mental energy surged. Yin Nuashing's eyes hardened when he saw the bronze statues marching over in an orderly fashion. He pointed the tip of his sword to the front and shouted softly. His body directly rushed forward. Little Moon and Yu also shouted behind him. They controlled their mental energy and charged into the bronze statue army with him. Crack! The two swords swept out. Two green sword glows with an aura that could sweep across the land formed a perfect crescent as they charged into the bronze statue army, without holding back. Immediately, the countless bronze statues in front were sent flying. They were thrown into the air and turned into pieces as they spun in the air. Roar, roar, roar. The empty eyes of the bronze statues turned blood red because of Yin Nuashing's attack. Wild and violent auras rose from the ground, and their bodies revealed a metallic luster. They looked extremely frightening. Yin Nuashing smacked his lips when he saw that 1/10 of the bronze statues had been destroyed. If they were outside, he would have used the Nether Void Sword to destroy at least 50% of this army of bronze statues. Even if he wasn't completely annihilated, he would have destroyed at least 50% of their strength and messed up their formation. It wouldn't have been like this, where only one troop was missing Rumble. The three of them directly charged into the gap that had been torn open. A frightening impact erupted the moment they came into contact with the bronze statue army. Wave after wave of powerful mental energy spluttered out, and the bronze statues within 100 feet radius were all shaken to death. The clang, clang, clang sound of the bronze statues collapsing continuously resounded over the star region. Other than Yin Nuashing and the other two, Little Moon had followed him back to the Qin family, and she had a powerful background. Yu was even the little princess of the second-ranked clan in the demon world. The three of them were powerful, and they would not be overwhelmed by a mere army. It was not impossible for them to cross 2 or 3 levels, or even 5 or 6 levels. However, they were only spiritual bodies here, and they could not use any powerful, profound skills. They could only use pure mental energy to fight. This caused their fighting strength to weaken, especially Yin Nuashing. It could be said that he had less than 1/10 of his fighting strength left. Even so, Yin Nuashing's mental energy far exceeded that of an ordinary person because of the strength of his soul. He stood at the front, back to back with Little Moon and Yu, forming a triangle. His 6 legs rose and fell in unison, and he seemed to casually swing his huge sword, but he would shatter most of the bronze statues in front of him. This kind of posture where he would attack with every step and blood would be spilled every 10 steps seemed rather stable. However, those bronze statues were not humans, and they did not have any expressions of fear. They all surged forward fearlessly, and even though they were shattered by the mental energy, the bronze statues behind them would still swarm forward in an overwhelming manner. Although the bronze statues in the periphery were powerful, Yin Nuoxing and the other two could still deal with them easily. Therefore, they could destroy the bronze statues with an unstoppable momentum. However, as they went deeper, the bronze statues became increasingly powerful, and their unbridled advance gradually slowed down. When they were several hundred feet deep, the empty battlefield that Yin Nuoxing and Yuer had cleared had shrunk from several hundred feet to less than 100 feet. Their walking pace also gradually slowed down. There were only 3 of them, and it was still too strenuous. Yin Nuoxing's sword sent the bronze statues that were 100 feet away flying. At this moment, he could not destroy an army with every swing of his sword. The bronze statues that appeared beside him already had the fighting strength of the 7th seal of the devil rank, which made his expression even more serious. Sometimes he would have to swing his sword many times before he could shatter a bronze statue into pieces. Just as he felt that it was getting more and more troublesome, the resonance in his body caused him to be slightly stunned. He hurriedly looked inside himself, and then he saw that a few meridians seemed to be circulating inadvertently. Those were the main meridians for circulating the heavenly chasm sword art. Even if the divine rank profound technique is not of the mental energy attribute, it can still be activated by the mental energy body. Yin Nuoxing was surprised when he sensed the heat in his veins. His expression turned a little focused. At this moment, they had already reached the deepest part of the army. There were bronze statues all around them, and it was already a little difficult for them to retreat. If he could activate them, let's give it a try. After shattering the pile of bronze statues with a swing of his sword, he looked at the 2 girls beside him. Little Moon and Yu were already panting, and Yin Nuoxing's expression was also serious. He nodded and stopped. Then, he took a deep breath, put his 2 swords together, and raised them above his head. Little Moon and Yuer saw that he suddenly stopped, and their expressions changed slightly. However, they did not panic. The 2 of them looked at each other, nodded, and took a step forward. They stood beside Yin Nuoxing one after the other. Although they did not know why he suddenly stopped, they would have to bear the burden of one less person if he stopped. Moreover, they were already so deep in, and it was almost impossible for them to leave. Boom! Just as Yuer and Little Moon were about to attack, a mental energy storm suddenly surged out of Yin Nuoxing's body. The 2 girls were shocked, and they quickly stabilized their bodies. Then, they saw some golden light surging out of Yin Nuoxing's body. The paths that the golden light flowed through seemed to be the paths of meridians. Roar, roar, roar. All the bronze statues raised their heads and roared. Their eyes were blood red. Then, they stomped their feet on the ground and turned into huge bronze cannonballs. They charged wildly toward Yin Nuoxing and the other 2. That momentum made Little Moon and Yuer pale. World-slaying formation. However, before the bronze statues could reach them, Yin Nuoxing shouted. Terrifying mental energy surged out of his body along with the golden light. It quickly gathered above his head and turned into 12 huge mental energy swords. The swords were pointed toward the sky, and the hilts were pointed downward. They were at least 1,000 feet long, and they surrounded the 3 of them in a circle. Slash! Yin Nuoxing's colorful eyes looked at the bronze statues that were charging towards him. He let out a soft cry, and the 2 swords that were raised up high suddenly slashed down. The 12 huge swords that were hanging above his head also slashed down fiercely. Boom! 12 huge cyan sword lights formed a circle that surged into the distance like a tide. Wherever the cyan sword lights passed, the bronze statues would be sliced into powder by the countless sword lights. They would explode and turn into copper powder that drifted through the star field. Yin Nuoxing also looked at this scene in shock. He was just trying it out. He didn't expect it. The green tide grew bigger and bigger, as if it was about to become a tsunami that covered the distance. The bronze statue army that filled the sky silently turned into powder under the green tide. Roar! At the front, a huge golden statue suddenly rose from the ground. Yun Nuoxing's expression froze when he saw that huge figure. He subconsciously raised his two swords. Bang! However, before he could do anything, the green sword aura tide that was 1,000 feet long violently smashed against the huge statue. The terrifying strength directly covered the huge golden statue, after which the sharp sword aura cut the golden statue into thousands of pieces in an instant. Compared to the bronze statues that were directly turned into powder, this huge golden statue seemed to be much stronger. Go! Yun Nuoxing was slightly stunned when he saw that the bronze statue army had completely disappeared. However, he didn't wait for long before he let out a soft cry, and the huge mental energy sword disappeared. After which, his hands grabbed Yuer and Little Moon's slender waist without any explanation. His feet pushed off the ground, and he rushed towards the altar that was exposed in his line of sight. The distance of 1,000 feet was covered in a flash. Yun Nuoxing's mental energy instantly surged when his feet landed on the stone steps in front of the altar. However, there was no reaction from the surroundings. When he landed on the stone steps in front of the altar, the flames on the stone pillar at the top began to flicker. This altar, which had not changed since ancient times, finally showed some changes with the arrival of Yun Nuoxing and the other two. Turning his head and looking outside, the copper powder that filled the sky disappeared after they climbed up the stone steps. The huge golden statue's body also disappeared without a trace. It was as if nothing had happened. They charged over. Yuer, who was curled up in Yun Nuoxing's embrace, also raised her head when she saw the stone steps. She looked up and saw many stone pillars standing at the edge of the circular platform that was a few meters tall. Flames swayed, as if they were telling of the eternal loneliness of this place. Chapter 710. That's it. Yun Nuoxing stared blankly at the platform that was only a few meters tall. She couldn't believe that they would be able to get their hands on such a treasure that was coveted by countless people in the demon world, right? Of course not. Right now, we just need to break through the copper array. The real test is when we try to inherit it. Yuer shook her head gently and pursed her red lips. Mei Mao looked at Yun Nuoxing hopefully for a while, but she didn't say anything. She only changed the topic after a while. Let's go over first. Yuer gently waved her jade-like hand. She cannot be bothered to rest, as she pulled Yun Nuoxing and walked towards the tall platform. Yun Nuoxing and little Yu Guang looked at each other in astonishment when they heard her suddenly withdraw her cheerful tone and become a little serious and solemn. However, they did not ask anything as they followed closely behind. As they approached the platform, Yuer's breathing became slightly hurried. Mei Mao's eyes flickered slightly, as if she was struggling. Yun Nuoxing's jade-like hand tightened a little. The latter could feel her inexplicable emotions, but she didn't ask anything. She just squeezed her little hand tightly, as if she was responding to her. The platform was a few meters tall, and it didn't take long for them to climb up the stairs. When they reached the top, Yuer stopped, and Yun Nuoxing looked around curiously. The round platform was engraved with dense magic runes, as if they had gathered together to form a picture. However, these magic runes had become dull with the passage of time, as if they had lost their original power. In the demon world, the inheritance of bloodlines is highly valued. The strength of a race is also determined through the power of the bloodline. In order to inherit the Saint Demon chessboard, one must have the power of the Saint Demon clan's bloodline. Other bloodlines might cause a powerful backlash, but my father told me that a bloodline stronger than the Saint Demon clan's bloodline should be able to shake off this restriction, Yuer said softly. She stared at the huge pattern in the center of the altar and murmured softly, "Although I didn't have many happy experiences in the clan, and I didn't even have a normal childhood, it is still my clan. I also hope that I can do something for it. The things in the Saint Demon chessboard can help it reach a higher level." After finished speaking, she took a light breath and turned her head. Mei Mao looked at Yun Nuoxing with some expectation. She knew her background and Yun Nuoxing's background. She only said it because she knew all of this. Although she always looked very happy, she felt a little depressed in the depths of her heart. In terms of background, the two of them were enemies. Yun Nuoxing's bright eyes flashed. Seeing Yu Er's troubled expression, she couldn't help but smile. She reached out her hand and stroked her hair, saying softly, "Go, we will protect you." Hearing this, Yu Er and Mei Mao were touched. Just as she opened her cherry lips and wanted to say something, Yun Nuoxing covered her mouth with her hand and said with a smile, "I am only doing this for you, Yu. It has nothing to do with your family background." Yu Er nodded solemnly. Then she said softly, "If it comes to that, Yu won't let them hurt Brother Yun at all." Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled and didn't say anything. She patted her little head and said, "Go." Yu nodded. She took a deep breath and walked slowly to the center of the round platform. Yun Nuoxing also cautiously circulated the mental strength in her body and observed the situation around her. Little Moon also squeezed Yun Nuoxing's hand tightly. Mei Mao turned to him and muttered worriedly, "Big brother, that kind of situation won't happen, right?" Hearing Little Moon's somewhat extravagant hope, Yun Nuoxing sighed softly and shook her head. "I also don't know what the situation will be like in the future." During the last Taiyuan Grand Meeting, the Demon World had already sent a letter of challenge to the God World. Although they didn't explicitly say that they were going to fight, there will still be some small conflicts between the two sides. I'm afraid that these small conflicts will turn into a big war. Yun Nuoxing paused for a moment, then continued. The feud between the God World and the Demon World has been accumulating for 3 to 4 eras, and there has never been a day where it has truly disappeared. The so-called peace is only a treaty of rest signed when both sides are of equal status. The fragile balance can be easily broken. In my opinion, when the Demon World appears this time, there might really be a war going on. Yu Er's race, the ancient demon god race, is the second strongest race in the Demon World. If there is an all-out war, they will also be one of the forces that will contribute the most. Little Moon's expression changed slightly when she saw Yun Nuoxing's serious expression. She clenched her jade-like hands even tighter, and some sweat seeped out of her palms. "It's fine. That day might still be a little far away. Maybe I'm just worrying for nothing. Maybe the 3 realms will get along harmoniously this time." Yun Nuoxing smiled and rubbed her little head, then said, "No matter what happens in the end, I will protect the people around me. Those idiots, nothing can happen to any of them. The same goes for all of you." Little Moon nodded lightly. Casting aside those messy thoughts, she looked at Mei Mao on the round platform. While they were conversing, Yu had already walked to the center of the demonic pattern painting. Yu took a deep breath. Her jade-like hands gently caressed the black demonic patterns below her body. She rolled up her sleeves, then her fingertips lightly brushed across her smooth wrist. A trace of blood stained with demonic aura appeared, and fresh blood flowed down her pure white arm, dripping into the air. Buzz! After the blood stained with demonic aura appeared, the complex demonic patterns on the altar lit up. The demonic patterns that had been dormant for countless years seemed to have come alive at this moment. The blood that flowed down her jade-like hands was guided and fell towards the demonic patterns below. As bean-sized drops of demonic blood fell into the demonic patterns on the altar began to fluctuate. Specks of dark light flickered, and in the end, a weak suction force erupted. That suction force was nothing to Yun Nuoxing and Little Moon, but the expression of Yu who was squatting in the center of the demonic pattern painting, changed. That suction force was directed at her, causing the demonic blood in her body to flow twice as fast. Large amounts of demonic blood were constantly spurting out from her wrist. Yu-Er's face turned slightly pale, but she still clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. As large amounts of blood were drawn out, a sense of weakness appeared in her body. Her petite body began to tremble violently. She was like a duckweed floating on the sea, swaying unsteadily in the sea, as if she could fall at any time. Yin Nuoxing looked at the huge amount of blood that was being drawn out, and her cheeks twitched. Little Moon could not bear to watch any longer. She buried her little face in his chest, as she could not bear to watch such a terrifying scene. Her heart was beating rapidly, as if it wanted to draw out all the blood in her body. Yuer's pale face was almost transparent at this moment, and bean-sized drops of sweat slid down her forehead. As more than half of her blood was drawn out, she felt cold and could not help but curl up her body. Mei Mao's eyes flickered slightly. Seeing that the demonic patterns were far from fully awakening, Mei Mao struggled. She had somewhat underestimated the amount of blood needed to activate the demonic patterns. Of course, this was also because her cultivation was not very high. If a high-level god from the ancient demon god clan were to come, perhaps a small bowl of blood would be able to activate the demonic patterns. It's still not possible. After waiting for a while, seeing that the demonic patterns were far from fully awakening, Yuer smiled bitterly and could not help but sigh. Just as she was about to reach out to stop the blood and give up on this operation, she was stunned. At this moment, her body seemed to have been fixed, and she could not move. The demonic patterns below her seemed to have sensed that she was about to give up. A force descended from the sky, oppressing her body and solidifying it. The suction force increased by a lot, rapidly drawing out even more blood from her body. Yuer looked at this scene in horror. The rapidly decreasing vitality in her body made her feel terrified. The demonic patterns were really like a ferocious demon at this moment, greedily sucking her blood. If she allowed it to devour her blood without restraint, it would definitely suck her completely dry. This scene made her extremely terrified. She regretted her recklessness in this operation. How could a little girl like her casually touch the heritage left behind by the Saint Demon clan? Even if the demonic blood in her body was more noble than the Saint Demon clans, it was still not enough. She wanted to open her mouth and call for help, but her body was completely fixed and stiff. Even when she opened her mouth, no sound came out. In these few seconds, Yuer had less than 30% of her blood left. If she was an ordinary person, she would have died long ago. Even if she could rely on the power of her bloodline to hold on for a little longer, if all her blood was sucked out, she would not be able to survive. Brother Yun, Brother Yun, Brother Yun, save me. Yuer was a little desperate. She tried hard to shout, but no sound came out. She blamed herself for having her back facing Yin Nuoxing and the others so that they could not see the situation here. Many emotions surged in her heart, and she even felt the cold and merciless taste of death. Yin Nuoxing had been staring at the altar. After the demonic patterns were stained with Yuer's blood, they became even more strange. He could feel the evil of the demonic patterns without needing anyone to remind him. The dark light was tinged with a faint blood-red light. The blood-red light dyed every inch of the demonic patterns, as if it would not stop until it dyed all the demonic patterns. Oh no, something happened to the girl. Seeing Yuer's stiff body and increasingly dispirited aura, Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. He did not expect something to happen under his watch. He immediately cursed and hurriedly let go of Little Moon before rushing into the altar. When Yin Nuoxing stepped into the altar, the powerful force also landed on him. However, before that force could solidify him, the golden blood in his body suddenly boiled. That terrifying force dissipated like spring snow under the warm sun. Even his speed did not decrease at all. Yin Nuoxing frowned when he felt a wave of energy descend on his body in an instant and then disappear in an instant. He did not think much about it, and directly rushed in front of Yuer and knelt down. Yin Nuoxing was also stunned when he saw the beautiful face that was as white as a flower. There were even 2 streaks of tears on her face. Her wide-open, beautiful eyes were empty and lifeless. He hurriedly grabbed her jade-like hand. However, the force that imprisoned the latter seemed to be extremely strong. Even if he couldn't control himself, he couldn't break the shackles on her body. Blood was still gushing out from the wound on her wrist. Perhaps it was because there wasn't much blood left, but the rate at which the blood was dripping was much slower. If she were to delay any longer, she reckoned that there would be another soul on the altar by now. Yin Nuoshing was shocked. He glanced at his wrist, and an idea came to him. Without thinking much, he cut his wrist very roughly and stuffed it into Yu-Er's little mouth. The golden red blood seemed to spurt out with a sweet smell. It poured into Yu-Er's little mouth, and streaks of blood flowed down the corners of her mouth. After he cut his wrist, he used his other hand to grab the wrist that was still dripping with blood. He squeezed it tightly in an attempt to stop the blood from flowing out. However, the powerful suction force caused the blood to flow out through the gaps between his fingers. He could only panic and pray that his half of God's blood would be able to save Yu-Er, whose life was hanging by a thread. Yu-Er? Yu-Er, wake up! Yu-Er! Yin Nuoshing pressed his forehead against Yu-Er's head and shouted with all his might. His voice caused Little Moon, who had been facing away from him, to quickly turn her head. She saw this scene that made her heart tremble. However, she could only stand outside the altar and worry helplessly. Buzz. The golden red water carried a sweet fragrance as it slowly flowed into her heart. It caused this almost dried-up land to be filled with life once again. Moreover, the life force was even stronger than before. It filled up the incomparably huge hole in her heart in an instant. Some golden light flashed across her empty eyes. The golden red blood flowed into her body and transformed into a vast and mighty mysterious energy that swiftly spread. It charged into her limbs and bones, and even collided with her blood vessels. Immediately, her originally somewhat shriveled body was wrapped by a layer of faint golden light. A feeling of being filled with power that was even stronger than when she was at her peak spontaneously rose. The golden light that flashed across her eyes slowly condensed. Soon after, light once again gathered in her charming eyes, and she regained her vigor. Yu-Er was slightly taken aback. When she saw the beautiful face that was so close to her, her pretty face turned slightly red. The paleness on her pretty face faded and was completely covered by a rosy color. There was some shyness in her bright eyes. Just as she was about to say something, her rosy little mouth moved as she felt that she had touched something. She could not help but lower her eyes. What she saw was a fair and flawless wrist. The sweet blood that continuously flowed into her body nourished her body. Yu-Er could feel that she had a greedy desire for this blood. It made her want to suck it until all the blood in his body was sucked dry. Brother Yin, however, this thought did not appear for more than half a second before it was strangled in her mind. Looking at Yin Nuoshing's pale face as he softly muttered her name, Yu-Er felt a little guilty. However, what followed was gratitude and gratitude. She never thought that Yin Nuoshing would go to such an extent for her. The golden blood flew through her body, causing the blood in her body to regenerate several times faster. Moreover, it was even more powerful. The energy that it contained was definitely not something that the previous blood could compare to. The speed of the bleeding, which had just slowed down, sped up again. Yu-Er frowned slightly. Although Yin Nuoshing gave her strength, the feeling of her blood being forcefully drawn out was really uncomfortable. Moreover, the regenerated blood in her body was also draining her mental energy and physical strength, causing her to feel a little pain. Fortunately, the strength of the regenerated blood allowed the light that covered the demonic patterns to surge out. Soon, the demonic patterns on the altar were completely covered. Buzz, the demonic patterns lit up with a mixture of blood red and golden light. As the demonic patterns lit up, the feeling of imprisonment also gradually faded. In just a short while, it completely disappeared. The feeling of imprisonment on Yu-Er's body also disappeared. Seeing that Yin Nuoshing's eyes were still tightly shut, Yu-Er blinked her Mei-Mao. She suddenly stuck out her little pink tongue and gently licked his wrist. She also gently stretched out her hand and hugged his waist. The slight numbness and the soft touch on his waist startled Yin Nuoshing. He opened his eyes and saw that Yu was looking at him slyly with Mei-Mao's eyes. He could not help but be stunned. "You're alive," seeing that she was in high spirits. Yin Nuashing also heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, Yu Er's dispirited and dying appearance had scared him to death. Yu nodded her head gently and blinked her Mei Mao. Yin Nuashing did not seem to be able to react. She was not in a hurry. She stuck out her tongue like a kitten and licked his wound. Then, she pressed down on the wound on his wrist. Only then did Yin Nuashing react. Her pretty face blushed slightly, and she coughed lightly. She wanted to withdraw her hand, but when she saw Yin Nuashing's intoxicated look, for some reason, she didn't do so. She only stretched out her other hand to help Yu slowly stand up. After a long while, Yu licked all the bloodstains on Yin Nuashing's wrist clean. Only then did she retract her little head with a blush on her pretty face. Her pretty face was so red that it looked like it could drip blood. Yin Nuashing's cheeks were also red. For a moment, he did not know what to say. "What did you two do?" Little Moon, who walked in from outside the altar, could not help but ask softly when she saw that something was wrong with the two of them. Her voice was like a sudden clap of thunder, causing Yin Nuashing and Yin Nuashing to be stunned for a moment. Then, they quickly laughed dryly and shook their heads. They looked as if they had been caught in the act. Little Moon looked at the two of them strangely and could not help but mutter, "Something's wrong." Yin Nuashing laughed dryly. Yu Er's pretty face was so red that it looked like it was about to burn. Chapter 711. After checking to make sure that there was nothing wrong with his body, he looked at the altar that was glowing faintly. Under the starlight in the sky, he could easily see the altar. Other than the mage-weth that was lit up by blood, there was nothing special about it. The burning stone pillars were still motionless, as if they were just decorations. "Is this all?" Yin Nuashing asked softly as he looked at Yu Er. Hearing this, Yu Er chuckled and generously extended her arm. On the palm of the hand that had just bled, there was a thumb-sized yin-yang symbol. Moreover, it was gently rotating, appearing to be very intelligent. It can be considered as a preliminary subjugation. I should be able to come into contact with some things. However, I'll have to wait until I fully control it before I can use it on a deeper level. To put it simply, I don't have enough authority. This will take time to settle. Yu Er held his arm and smiled. It's all thanks to Brother Yin this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to light up the mage-weth on my own. I might have died here after my blood was sucked dry. Yu Er took a deep breath and looked at the faintly glowing mage-weth under her feet. She still had some lingering fear. She had almost died just now. Moreover, because the blood that Brother Yun helped me recover has some of Brother Yun's marks, Brother Yun can also move this sacred demon chessboard. Yu Er smiled and held Yin Nuashing's right hand up. Under the colorful patterns on his palm, there was also a small yin-yang image. He gently clasped it with Yu Er's left hand, and the two yin-yang images stuck together perfectly. Yin Nuashing didn't think much of it, but Yu Er's next sentence made him blush. Yu Er and Brother Yun are connected by blood. When Little Moon heard this, Mei Mao immediately stood up and glared at Yu resentfully. Then, she looked at Yin Nuashing unwillingly. Those eyes that contained the most brilliant colors in the world seemed to be telling him something, which made Yin Nuashing smile bitterly. These two girls, however, he also knew that the so-called connection by blood didn't really mean that Yu Er had the same blood as him. When his blood flowed into her body, it turned into pure energy. It only left some marks in her body. Those marks were left by Xianyin, and they had a magical power that would continuously improve Yu Er's physique. Moreover, after many years of assimilation, those marks also contained Yin Nuashing's aura. If other people were to sense Yu Er's aura now, they might mistake it for Yin Nuashing's aura. Yu Er said softly, "There are many things in the sacred demon chessboard. For example, the copper array, just now, is actually an array to nurture weapons. There are also many things placed in other places that can be used to temper spiritual power." After taking control of the sacred demon chessboard, bits and pieces of information appeared in his mind. Yin Nuashing took a few more glances and couldn't help but click his tongue in praise. as expected of something that the experts of the demon world were desperately searching for. There were some things that even he was very curious about. It could be called a secret cultivation base that could cultivate a large number of experts here. Most of the places are sealed. Let's come back and take a look when we feel like it. Yin Nuoshing spread out his hands helplessly. The sacred demon chessboard couldn't be used at the moment. As for the seal, I will try to break it, but it will take some time. Mei Mao circled around the space of the star field. You said softly, let's go out first. Yin Nuoshing nodded. With a thought, he floated out of the sacred demon chessboard. Little Moon, and you are also floated out. In the hall, 3 figures suddenly appeared in midair. As soon as they appeared, they fell down before they could react. On the floor of the hall, there was a large pile of broken copper pieces. Ping ling pang lang. Dong. The 3 of them fell from the sky like a human pyramid. The copper pieces below were sent flying all over the hall. The pile of copper in the corner also fell down. Yin Nuoshing, who was at the bottom, complained incessantly. She had just bled and hadn't rested. Now, she was being pressed down by 2 buttocks. She had just woken up not long ago, but she was being tortured again. When the 2 girls heard the screams, they hurriedly helped Yin Nuoshing stand up. After they cleaned up the pile of broken copper and iron, the 3 of them supported each other and walked out of the hall. Although they didn't know how long they had been in the outside world, their spiritual bodies had indeed spent 3 days in the sacred demon chessboard. They had a big battle, and Yin Nuoshing and Yu had bled tons of blood. When they didn't come out, they didn't feel anything. When their spiritual bodies returned to their bodies, they felt uncomfortable all over. Yin Nuoshing carried the 2 girls and threw them back to their rooms. She also let out a long yawn. She originally wanted to go back to the academy, but now it seemed that she should obediently rest for one more round. She dragged her tired body and walked around the mansion. Yuan Shi and the others were still cultivating, and Qin Yin had gone to refine gems again. When she saw Yin Nuoshing, she guessed that some time had passed. However, the Golden Princess and the others didn't come back. The huge mansion was very quiet. When Yin Nuoshing returned to the room that belonged to her, she was surprised to see Xian and Feng, her hugging little Bing Air and sleeping soundly. She stared at the 3 girls' sleeping appearance with amusement. After a few minutes, she couldn't help but be a little dazed. She hurriedly rubbed her blushing face and climbed onto another bed. She stretched a little and resisted the urge to sleep. She entered a state of meditation, and the 6 paths of reincarnation disc between her eyebrows quietly rotated. The next day, when Yin Nuoshing woke up from the shallow level of meditation, she immediately felt that her mental exhaustion was swept away. The slight weakness that was brought about by Yu Er's gluttony of drinking 1/3 of her blood had also weakened a lot. The state of meditation of the 1,000 Dreams Heart Sutra is much faster than normal cultivation. Feeling the powerful energy circulating in her body, Yin Nuoshing couldn't help but sigh. Unknowingly, she had reached the 2nd seal of the devil rank. When she scanned her body with her mind and saw a light spot in her chest, she hesitated for a moment. That day, Feng Yuing saw his memories and naturally saw the scene of him talking to the owner of the maze. Since she even helped him open up an independent space, it was clear that Feng Yuing also agreed with this suggestion. Her mind entered the light spot and sensed a vast and endless space. However, this was only an empty space and had a very strong ability to seal energy. According to Yin Nuoshing's idea, if this space was filled with refined energy, compressed, and released in one go, he could indeed reach the demigod rank from the 2nd seal of the devil rank. However, he didn't know what would happen. Would he become an abyssal or an abyssal? Or would he become an abyssal and transform? He didn't dare to take the risk. After lazily stretching his waist, Yin Nuoshing paused for a moment. Only then did he feel a warm and soft sensation coming from his embrace. Lowering his head to take a look, he saw Yin snuggling in his embrace and sleeping soundly. Her jade-like hands were still tightly hugging him, and her charming face had a serene expression. Yin Nuoshing smiled. It seemed that this girl had woken up at some point and deliberately moved to his side. Turning around, on the other bed, Feng Er and Little Bing Er were also sleeping soundly. The two girls, who were both divine beasts, seemed to be very close. Bending down, Yun Nuoxing stretched out his hand to support his head and looked at Xian's sleeping face with some fascination. After a while, he lowered his head and lightly kissed the girl's red lips. Then he quietly got off the bed and walked to the other side. He also lightly touched Feng Er's red lips like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. Only then did he push open the door and leave. Just as he left the room, two pairs of bright eyes slowly opened in the room. The pair of crimson pink and deep purple eyes looked at each other, and both of them smiled faintly. Coming out of the room, Yun Nuoxing habitually released his soul power. He raised his head and faced the sun. Even his 6 wings stretched out comfortably, as if he was bathing in the sun together with his soul. It was so comfortable that Yun Nuoxing narrowed his eyes and felt a little lazy. Not long after his soul power spread out, Yun Nuoxing raised the corner of his eyes. Then, he let out a long yawn and walked unhurriedly toward the hall. He didn't expect that someone would come to visit. Enjoying this leisure and laziness, Yun Nuoxing let out a long moan. He deliberately walked in a circle around the small bamboo forest. Then, he walked toward the hall and gently pushed open the door. In the hall, Princess Jean and the others had also returned. Brother Na. The moment Yun Nuoxing appeared, Yi Shi, who was sitting closest to the door, turned her gaze. When she saw Yun Nuoxing's appearance, joy appeared on her young and tender face. She jumped down from the chair and habitually wanted to burrow into his arms. Then, she stood rooted to the ground. Her wine-red eyes looked at him strangely. She opened her small mouth and didn't know what to say for a moment. "Oh, you're awake." Your friends, at the side of the hall, Princess Jean and Lachine also turned their heads. They had just smiled and said a sentence when they were simultaneously stunned. Mei Mao's eyes flashed with a strange light. Then, it turned into a teasing look. "Brother Yun." Suddenly, light laughter came from the side. Yun Nuoxing turned his head and saw Lin Sheng, Ding Mengyu, and the others walking over from the side. He couldn't help but look at them curiously. Why were there so many people today? Just as Lin Sheng and the rest were about to say something, their gazes suddenly landed on Yun Nuoxing's face. Then, their expressions became very strange. Jun Luo Yi's beautiful eyes turned slightly, and she blinked lightly at him, as if she was hinting at something. However, Yun Nuoxing had just woken up, and his mind could not wrap around it for a while. "Brother Nuo, go wash your face." In the end, it was Ishi who couldn't stand it anymore. She coughed dryly, and her small face was a little red. Then, she hurriedly took out a mirror and handed it to Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing's expression was strange. He took the mirror and looked inside. Then, his expression became very interesting. On his cheeks, there were 2 bright red lipstick marks, tender and beautiful. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. He didn't need to think to know what was going on. No wonder everyone's expressions became so interesting. Little Junior just played intimately, but he can't bear to wash his face. Chuamu looked at him enviously and couldn't help but sigh. Everyone, after a while, Yun Nuoxing returned to the hall while wiping his face. When he saw everyone's gossipy gazes, he couldn't be bothered to explain anything. He roared fiercely in his heart. "I'll teach these 2 brats a lesson tonight." "So, why are there so many people here? Did something happen?" Yun Nuoxing picked up a cup of tea and took a sip. Then, he used the firelight to engrave a sentence in front of him with a natural expression. "Little Junior, you still can't speak." When Lin Sheng saw this, he couldn't help but sigh. He recalled what happened more than a month ago. He didn't expect that the aftereffects of what happened back then had not disappeared until now. "It's fine. I'll be fine in a few months." Yun Nuoxing smiled casually. The firelight in front of him changed into another sentence. Everyone's cheeks twitched. Not speaking for a few months was so stifling. "We're here to pay a visit to the future Hall Master of the 9 Gods Hall. We're afraid that one person isn't enough, so we came together." Jun Luo, he covered her mouth and chuckled. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Ding Mingyu helplessly shook her head. When you weren't in the academy for over a month, some things happened. For the annual competition between the Farlight Academy and the Remote Sea Academy, the battle for the top 5 of the Devil rankings was delayed because of your absence. Chuan Mu continued. Both sides had a discussion. Because you were injured during a mission, those fellows from the Remote Ocean Academy didn't dare to push you too far. They agreed to postpone the competition. As for the other big and small competitions, such as the Half-Demon competition and the Fortress competition, they have all ended. The only thing left is the competition for the top 5. If we win, our academy wins. If we lose, we lose. And if we don't see anyone participating in the competition after 2 days, it means that we have forfeited and our Farlight Academy has lost. Wait a minute. What's the Fortress competition? Yun Nuoxing raised his head in astonishment. 2 factions will fight. 1 mentor will be the gatekeeper, and 3 students will be the generals. The rest will fight in the primordial field. Whichever side's gatekeeper and generals are defeated first will be the loser. Lin Ran explained. After that, he sighed. In the past, this was the most exciting competition. The strength of the mentor must be at the half-god realm. There are no other restrictions. This year, Shui Lingfeng didn't make it back in time because of a mission and missed the Fortress competition. Junior, you weren't around either. Our side was almost completely defeated. However, junior brother Lin Sheng dominated the half-devil battle and turned the tables. Now, only the top 5 are left. Shui Lingfeng has also been summoned back. Junior brother, you're the only one left. Ding Mingyu hesitated. Shui Lingfeng? Ah, the guy ranked first on the devil rankings. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. After that, he suddenly understood. After the battle, he became the 4th ranker on the devil rankings. He had seen the 5th ranker, the 2nd ranker, and the 3rd ranker. The only one he hadn't seen was Shui Lingfeng. Have you rested well? If you have, make a trip back to the academy with us. The elders seem to have other matters to discuss with us. Ding Mingyu spoke softly. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment. After a moment, he nodded his head and said, All right, let's make a trip back now. I originally wanted to slack off for a while more. After saying that, he couldn't help but sigh. Those words appeared in his mind, causing Ding Mingyu and the others to bitterly smile. Chapter 712. After tidying up a little, Yin Nuoxing went to the room to check on Little Moon and Yuer, who were still sleeping soundly. Then, he went to the secret room to check on Qin Yin, who was working hard. He hesitated for a moment, then left a note in front of the door. Then, he prepared to leave with Xian and Feng, who had already woken up. However, when he saw Little Bing Air, he suddenly had a headache. He couldn't bring her to the academy. Could he? He was afraid that she would act childishly and accidentally destroy the academy. He couldn't bring her. Little Bing Air was only a few days old, and the only person he felt close to was Yin Nuoxing. If he didn't bring Little Bing Air with him, what would happen to Little Bing Air? Originally, he didn't need to worry about this. However, when he found out that Little Bing Air couldn't be put back into his soul, he had a big headache. Little Bing Air is transforming. She's beginning to adapt to the strong power in her body. With the soul contract, logically speaking, she should be able to return to your soul during this period of time. However, I don't know what's wrong, so she can only stay like this for now. Fenger also didn't understand what was going on. For this reason, she even dragged the sleeping little white out of her soul. However, when Fenger saw the situation, she was also confused. In the end, she could only push all the responsibility to Yin Nuoxing. You let her absorb too many sacred items. I'm afraid that some of them have a reaction, so she can't enter the soul state. Or maybe her soul is transforming. Whoa. During this period of time, you just have to take care of the child obediently. Don't worry. The soul contract will double the speed of her transformation. Just don't go too far away. After that, she flicked her tail and retreated into Yun Nuoxing's soul to sleep, leaving Yun Nuoxing confused and at a loss. We'll take care of Bing Air. Xian smiled and rubbed Yin Nuoxing's head. Yin Nuoxing looked at her silently, and then looked at Feng, who was nodding at the side. She suddenly sighed and said, "I feel like I have a family now." As soon as he finished speaking, the two girls blushed and glared at him. They reached out their hands at the same time and pinched his cheeks. "I haven't settled the score with you two for leaving a mark on my face." After being pinched, Yin Nuashing suddenly thought of something and stared at Xian and Feng maliciously. The two girls felt their hair stand on end. Before they could escape, they were caught by Yin Nuashing and slapped hard on their buttocks. "Ah!" Xian and Feng exclaimed when their butts were slapped hard. Their faces instantly turned blood red, and they stared at him with shame and anger. However, they saw him reach out and rub their heads again, which made them speechless. Soft and bouncy. Yin Nuashing looked straight ahead and smiled wickedly. She even squeezed her hands lightly, as if she could still feel the sensation in her hands. Xian and Mei Mao blushed when they saw this. After fooling around for a while, Yin Nuashing carried little Bing Air out of the room. When they came to the hall, Lin Sheng and the others were stunned when they saw another little girl. Especially when they saw Yin Nuashing carrying the child. Their expressions became even stranger. "Could it be? Little Junior, is this your child?" Chuan Mu's brain twitched, and he didn't close his big mouth. He directly blurted out the question that everyone wanted to ask. After he said that, the Golden Princess, Yi Shi, and the others all spat out mouthfuls of saliva. Yin Nuashing's face darkened, and Ding Mengyu and the others were speechless. They didn't know how to smooth things over. "You're going back to the academy?" "Coincidentally, I'll go and have some fun too. There's no meaning in staying here." After hearing that they were going to the High Light Academy, Yishi jumped down from her chair. She tugged on his windbreaker and softly said, "Furthermore, my realm has stabilized. I still need a long time to break through to the late-stage God Emperor realm. I feel that the time I can spend with Big Brother Nua will be shortened by quite a bit." Yin Nuashing looked at her silently before raising her head. Seeing the weird gazes of Lin Sheng and the others, she couldn't help but facepalm and bitterly smiled. "It's fine as long as you like it." After being tormented for an entire morning, they finally walked out of the manor. Ding Mingyu and the others looked at Yin Nuashing and the others. They didn't know what to say. They originally wanted to call Yin Nuashing back to the academy. In the end, they pulled out a large group of people, and there was even a God Emperor expert among them. This level of expert was considered a legend to them, yet he chose to stick close to Yin Nuashing. It made them feel as though their world was collapsing, but after thinking about Yin Nuashing's identity, they felt relieved. They had no choice. Who asked her to have such a high status? She had a God Emperor protecting her 24/7, and there was even a group of God Emperor experts waiting to support her. Furthermore, she even had a powerful support group in the distant Divine Continent, since she had already exposed her identity and strength in front of Lin Sheng and the others. Yin Nuashing didn't waste any more time. With a stomp of her foot, a huge teleportation array rapidly condensed under her feet. It was completed in an instant. When Lin Sheng saw the speed at which Yin Nuashing was weaving the array, a trace of envy flashed across his eyes. He was also an array master and knew that array masters were weak before they could display their power. Even he needed some time to set up an array that he was proficient in. However, his combat strength wasn't weak either. That was why he had so many opportunities to weave arrays during battle. If he could be like Yin Nuashing and set up an array with just a wave of his hand, then the combat strength of an array master would be infinitely magnified. However, Lin Sheng was only thinking about it. To achieve this level, one would first need the light element. Only the extremely fast energy of the light element could allow one to weave an array as one wished and weave it in an instant. The instant the teleportation array froze, it suddenly lit up with a dazzling white light. Everyone only felt a blur in front of their eyes. In the blink of an eye, the scene in front of them instantly changed. Just a moment ago, they were still in the hall. At this moment, they had already appeared in a large hall. This was the small palace in the High Light Academy where Yun Nua was located. "We're here already?" Lin Sheng had been to this palace many times and was naturally very familiar with it. However, when he saw this scene appear in front of him, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Ding Mingyu and the others were also speechless. They had flown at full speed for half a day before arriving at the manor from the academy. Now, it had only taken them less than a second to return from there. It's a teleportation array. With the help of the power of space, as long as there's enough energy, you can teleport to a place you've been to once. Oh, unless that place is sealed. Yin Nuoxing smiled and clapped her hands. Everyone was speechless. This array was too convenient. Senior, are we going now? Yin Nuoxing asked Ding Mingyu with a smile. Yes, the elders are waiting for us at the Heavenly Sword Mountain. Let's go over first. Ding Mingyu nodded. Mei Mao sized up the small palace curiously. She had always lived in the small house she had built in the bamboo forest. She was curious about what this small palace was like. All right, you guys rest first. I'll be back soon. Upon hearing this, Yin Nuoxing nodded and smiled at Xian and the others. Then, she placed little Bing Air into her arms. Mei Mao fluttered slightly. Xian picked up little Bing Air and placed her in Feng Er's arms. Then, he stood behind Yin Nuoxing and smiled without saying anything. Everyone was speechless. Feng Er didn't say anything. After taking little Bing Air, she smiled gently and said to Yin Nuoxing and Xian, "Come back early." Seeing that she was like a gentle little wife, Yin Nuoxing blushed slightly. She rubbed her cheeks and nodded with a smile. Then, she looked at Ding Mingyu. The latter nodded slightly and walked out of the hall first. Behind her, Yin Nuoxing, Chuan Mu, and the others quickly followed. After the hall was empty, Feng Er sat down on the sofa with little Bing Air in her arms. Yishi glanced at her with her wine-red eyes. Then, she moved closer to her and teased, Feng, when did you and Brother Noah develop to this stage? Feng Er's hand that was gently caressing little Bing Air trembled. Feng Er's delicate body stiffened, and a captivating blush appeared on her alluring face. Her clear, crimson-red Mei Mao was rippling with unconcealable affection. It was enough to make anyone who looked at her feel intoxicated. Yishi couldn't help but be speechless. When did this girl fall so deeply in love? Was it really like what Little White said? It's a secret. Feng Er smiled gently. Her mysterious look made Yishi roll her eyes. She got up and went to make tea. Yin Nuoxing, Ding Mingyu, and the others quickly flew over the academy. The former felt the unique atmosphere in the academy and couldn't help but sigh. Although there were many restrictions here, she couldn't help but admit that the academy was a very suitable place for young people to grow up in peace. The group's ostentatious appearance attracted the attention of many people below. However, those students only saw a group of people flying by and didn't pay much attention to them. After flying for more than 10 minutes, Yin Nuoxing and the others arrived at the giant sword mountain. However, Ding Mingyu didn't stop. She led the group around the giant sword mountain and arrived at the back of the mountain. A mountain that was as tall as the giant sword mountain appeared in everyone's line of sight. Very few people came to this area. Moreover, the giant sword mountain was huge, so no one paid much attention to the back. They didn't expect that there would be a tall mountain that was as tall as the hilt of the giant sword mountain. There was a simple and unadorned large hall on the mountain. The deep black hall gave it a heavy and mysterious feeling. It was as if the large hall was as heavy as a mountain. After seeing the large hall, Ding Mingyu flew towards it. Yin Nuoxing and the others followed closely behind and landed in front of the large door. Everyone rubbed their faces and took a deep breath. After which, the former stretched out her slender finger and gently knocked on the door. "Come in." Just as Ding Mingyu's slender finger landed on the thick and heavy door, a faint laughter sounded from inside. Yin Nuoxing recognized that it was Yin Feng's voice. Hearing this, Ding Mingyu used her strength to push open the large black door that was 10 feet tall and slowly led the group in. Yin Nuoxing's gaze swept around and saw that there were many people standing in the large hall. Among them, there was Xian Yuan, whom she had met once, and Zhao Wenyao, who was ranked second. On the left of the two of them, there was a youth wearing a snow-white robe that was dazzling to the eyes. When they had just entered the large hall, The three of them also turned their gazes and landed on Yin Nuoxing and the others. Their gazes faintly flickered. Yin Nuoxing curiously glanced at the youth in the snow-white robe. His long black hair was casually draped over his shoulders. His face was resolute, yet had a contradictory gentleness. His deep eyes were like deep pools, and his thin lips were tightly pursed into a straight line. A silver-white long spear necklace hung in front of his chest. His well-defined face appeared extremely enchanting. Without much guessing, he knew who this figure was. Ever since the first day he had entered the High Light Academy, he had seen this figure. He had also heard of the deeds of the #1 person in the High Light Academy. Perhaps in the hearts of many students, only he was worthy of being the #1 person. While he was sizing up Shui Lingfeng, the latter also turned his head slightly to size him up. He had also heard of the rumors about this junior. The clearest impression he had was that this junior had a devastatingly beautiful face. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, he indeed lived up to his reputation. Even though he knew that Shui Lingfeng was a man, he couldn't help but admire him a little more. Xian Yuan glanced at Yin Nuoxing. Battle intent surged in his eyes. His expression was a little complicated as he nodded towards him. The defeat last time had made him slightly depressed, but it wasn't to the extent that he had lost his confidence. When Yin Nuoxing saw his appearance, he also smiled and nodded towards him. It seemed like this guy was still thinking about the previous matter and wanted to fight again. There were 3 figures in front of the hall. Among them, Yin Feng and Bing weren't unfamiliar to Yin Nuoxing. The other one was Elder Yin Yuting, a heaven-ranked elder of the Fire God Shrine. There were few seats beside them, but no one was sitting. At this moment, Yin Feng and the other 2 were calmly looking at Yin Nuoxing, who had walked in with a smile on their faces. "Ha! Our secret weapon is here." When he saw Yin Nuoxing, Yin Feng couldn't help but smile and tease him. Yin Nuoxing bitterly smiled and walked forward with Ding Mingyu. They stood between Zhao Wenyao and Xian Yuan, and then respectfully bowed to Yin Feng and the other 2. The former felt that he couldn't hold back his words, and couldn't help but write in the space. "Can you not talk about people as weapons?" Yin Feng laughed loudly. Then, he waved his hand and said, "Ding Mingyu should have already told you the details." "Then, we won't talk about it here." Then, he couldn't help but tease him. "This time, you bumped into us yourself. It has nothing to do with us." Seeing the smile on his face, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but twitch. He muttered in his heart, "Why do I smell a conspiracy?" Ding Mingyu, who knew his identity, wasn't surprised. Yin Nuoxing was the godson of the 9 Shrine. The 3 heaven-ranked elders in front of him were also from the 9 Shrine. They were talking like they were just chatting. Shui Lingfeng and the other 2 were at a loss. However, since the elders were talking, they couldn't interrupt. They could only stay silent like wooden statues. Young people should be more energetic. "You're living like an old man." Yin Feng rolled his eyes. Then, he waved his hand and glanced around. He said, "I won't say anything unnecessary. You are the strongest fighting force of the Academy. In 2 days, the top 5 competition will determine the honor of the Academy. Go all out and fight. But don't fight too hard. If you lose, there will be no punishment. If you win, there will be rewards." "Yes." Shui Lingfeng and the others nodded solemnly. Yin Nuoxing sighed and shrugged. Chapter 713. "Okay, let's talk about the next matter." Yin Feng nodded, then looked behind the 5. Xian, Lin Sheng, and the others were standing a few meters away. The former waved at them, then walked forward and stood side by side with Yin Nuoxing and the others. He cupped his fist respectfully towards Yin Feng and the others. "The competition between our 2 academies is just a warm-up. The Divine Institute exchange that will be held soon is the main event." Yin Feng paused for a moment. Bing coughed lightly, then continued, "All the Divine Institute academies in the Divine World can participate in the exchange. Naturally, the Farlight Academy will participate as well. It will be held 1 month from now. As for the location, it will be held in the entire academy. Yin Yiting smiled coquettishly from the side and said, "At that time, teleportation doors that lead to all the participating Divine Institute academies will be opened at the central square, and all the students will be able to head to the academies they wish to visit and carry out various forms of exchange. This is the greatest activity between academies." When they heard this, the faces of Yin Nuoxing and the others couldn't help but twitch. This was truly a feast. There were countless forces in the divine world that nurtured students. If all the teleportation gates were to be constructed, how many would there be? Won't this cause chaos? Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but write. Yes, and it will be very chaotic. It will last for an entire month. During that time, cough. During that time, you can challenge any academy. You can even kill 1,000 or 10,000 people if you want. As long as no one dies, the teachers of the various academies won't care. Or rather, there will be exchanges between teachers and elders in various senses, said Yin Feng with a smile. During that period of time, this place should be filled with students from the various academies. The more famous an academy is, the more people there would be. On average, every student would have to fight at least 10 battles. As the strongest few in the academies, you guys are the first to bear the brunt of it. For the top 10 rankers of the devil rankings in the past years, they would have to fight at least 100 battles in the exchange. If we calculate it this way, you guys would have to fight at least 3 battles a day. Bing faintly spoke. Yin Nuoxing, Shuel Lingfeng, and the others turned pale when they heard this. 100 rounds? Wouldn't they be exhausted to death? At this moment, all of them had an impulse to remove themselves from the devil rankings. When he saw their miserable appearances, Yin Feng laughed heartily and said, "If you don't want to be challenged, you could go to other academies and challenge others." Yin Yiting said, "Outstanding and active students will be displayed in the various academies." After the exchange, these students can go to other academies to cultivate for a year. They can come back whenever they want. Someone asked me to remind you that you can take this opportunity to go to the Flaming Li Academy. Your thing is going there, right? Yin Feng coughed dryly a few times, winked at Yin Nuoxing, and said. Yin Nuoxing nodded when he heard this. One of the stages of his second trial, the Trial of Fire, was to go to the Flaming Li Academy in the Ganyuan region. He was originally worried that he wouldn't be able to enter the Flaming Li Academy after he graduated from the Farlight Academy. Now, this exchange had given him a chance. However, if he wanted to take this opportunity to go to the Flaming Li Academy, then he had to display an outstanding performance. He felt that his combat strength wasn't inferior to these so-called students. However, this was an exchange between the Divine Academies, and he couldn't kill anyone. Otherwise, he would probably have to fight his way through with his bare hands. There were hundreds of thousands of academies, and every single one of them had the elite of the elite. No matter what, they definitely had some ability. So, it wasn't easy to stand out among these hundreds of thousands of academies and become the center of attention. Oh, right. That person told me that you're allowed to act recklessly. You'll be fine as long as you don't destroy the entire academy. Bing coughed dryly. Yin Nuoxing's face couldn't help but twitch when he saw the awkward expression on Bing's face. Was he trying to tempt him to commit a crime? If he were to act recklessly, then it wouldn't be as simple as the academy collapsing. Even Sunglow City would probably cry before him. Yin Feng smiled faintly when he saw the light flickering in Bing's eyes. He looked at the others and said with a smile, "The Farlight Academy belongs to the 9 Deities Palace. There are also a few similar elemental academies among the Divine Academies. So, don't cause trouble there. It's very simple to identify them, and there will be notes on the teleportation gate." Yin Nuoxing and the others smiled. They were all students of the elemental academies, so they naturally had to help each other during such a large-scale event. In short, this is a rare opportunity for you to exchange pointers with people from the other academies. Although there aren't any disciples from those great factions here, if you can stand out in the Divine Academy's exchange, it means that you'll have a place among the younger generation of the entire divine world, said Yin Feng. Oh, there's still a month until the exchange. I'm just reminding all of you in passing. As for the specifics, we'll talk about it before the exchange begins. As for now, Yin Feng coughed dryly, and then he shot a glance at Bing. Bing nodded. He waved his hand, and a large pile of paper suddenly appeared in the air. Stacks of paper fell from the sky and landed right before Yin Nuashing and the others. They subconsciously caught the stacks of paper, and they couldn't help but be stunned when they saw the first piece of paper. Now you can spread the news. You must accurately pass it on to everyone. Yin Yuting covered her mouth and giggled. Yin Nuashing and the others were dumbfounded. They lowered their heads and looked at the piece of paper at the top. It clearly stated everything about the Divine Academy's exchange. However, what caused them to break down was, what the hell? Put up advertisements? Can't we just announce it in the academy? How embarrassing. Yin Nuashing, Ding Meng Yu, and the others were on the verge of breaking down. They were actually asked to put up advertisements in the academy? Even though this was related to the Divine Academy's exchange, when they thought about how they would have to stand on the streets and hand out flyers. How embarrassing. The Divine Academy's exchange is held once every 3 years, and it's quite a long time apart. Not many students know about this, so I have to ask all of you to spread the news. It's decided then. Go on. Yin Feng smiled slyly as he waved his hand, and then his figure shook before the three of them vanished. They left behind Yin Nuashing and the others with dumbfounded expressions. They were still holding onto the large pile of flyers and had no idea what was going on. Their chaotic emotions lasted for quite some time before they finally calmed down, and then all of them sighed sorrowfully. Looks like we have to mobilize the members of our respective clubs to help us. He's carrying a few hundred flyers by himself, so how long would it take for him to hand them out? After they left the hall, Yin Nuashing stretched her body and yawned lazily. She turned around and glanced at Xian, who stood silently by her side, and then both of them smiled faintly. Little junior brother, Ding Mingyu and Jun Luo slowly walked over from the side. The former's sparkling silver Mei Mao stared straight at him, then glanced at Xian, then stared back at him and softly said, "Do you need to share some of the flyers?" No need, I thought of something funny. Yin Nuashing blinked, then couldn't help but laugh evilly. That look made Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the others who were walking over couldn't help but shudder. Although they didn't know what he was thinking of, they all felt that it wasn't something good. "Oh." Ding Mingyu stroked her long hair and nodded slightly, then asked in a seemingly casual manner, "What do you plan to do in 2 days?" Yin Nuashing crossed her fingers and smiled. "There's nothing to think about. Since Big Sister Jean has allowed me to act recklessly, then I'll act a little recklessly. I suddenly want to leave the academy." Lin Sheng's cheeks twitched violently, and he looked at him with lingering fear. They had seen how terrifying this guy was. If he really acted recklessly, he could easily destroy a city. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook his head. He transmitted his voice. "Don't worry, I won't use those things. I know my limits." Who knows? Everyone couldn't help but mutter in their hearts. This guy was a madman among madmen. Who knew what his limits were? At the entrance of the hall, Shui Lingfeng slowly walked toward Yin Nuashing and the others. He looked at them. Although they looked calm and docile, he felt a hidden sense of danger. That feeling almost suffocated him. He had heard about the matter of the battle invitation, and had also heard Xian Yuan talk about it. When everyone was sighing about this little junior brother's unusual talent, Shui Lingfeng had actually linked two seemingly unrelated matters together. This thought made him shudder. Shui Lingfeng slowly walked in front of them and looked at Yin Nuashing. He raised his hands and cupped his fists, then opened his mouth. I'm not, don't talk nonsense." Seeing that he was about to speak, Yin Nuashing's heart inexplicably skipped a beat. She quickly reached out her hand and said 3 words in a row. Everyone was stunned. Shui Lingfeng hadn't said anything yet. Shui Lingfeng was also stunned. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he only reacted after a moment. He took a light breath and was about to speak again. "Wait. I won't listen. Goodbye." Yin Nuashing's mouth twitched. He didn't even know what he wrote. Then he was ready to turn around and run away with sweat all over his forehead. "Little star, listen to me." Seeing that he turned around, Xian helplessly reached out her hand and grabbed Yin Nuoxing, who was about to run away. She smiled bitterly. What's wrong with him today? Everyone. Shui Lingfeng smiled bitterly and shook his head. Looking at the speechless crowd, he didn't know what to say for a moment. I just want to ask you for an answer. I don't mean anything else. Shui Lingfeng sighed. Without waiting for Yin Nuoxing to speak, he continued, more than a month ago, because someone broke through the 5th floor of the spiritual light tower, the stars illuminated the sky. A few days later, in the battle on the Battle King platform, countless people saw the energy you used. That was the pure power of the stars. I think that there should be some connection between these two, right? The phenomenon of the spiritual light tower illuminating was determined by the energy of the person who broke through, Shui Lingfeng said with a faint smile. Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. He couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart, as expected of the person who broke through the 4th floor. With just a little bit of experience, he could guess this. When Ding Mengyu and the others heard this news, they couldn't help but be shocked. The incident in the spiritual light tower had caused a sensation in the entire Longguang Academy. At that time, they couldn't find the person who caused the phenomenon, and the matter was left unsettled with the passage of time. Because they couldn't find the person who caused the phenomenon, it became a little mysterious. There were many rumors about this matter in the academy, and some of them were very ridiculous. If they heard this association more than a month ago, they would definitely laugh it off. However, at this moment, they thought that if it was Yin Nuoxing, this lunatic, he might really be able to do it. Scratching his head, Yin Nuoxing sighed helplessly. If it was a month ago, he would have found thousands of excuses to deny it. However, now that everyone knew about it, it would be a little hypocritical to try to cover it up. Scratching his cheeks with a dry smile, Yin Nuoxing looked straight at Ding Mengyu. His colorful eyes stared closely at the silver and resplendent Mei Mao, and then glanced at Shui Lingfeng. Only then did he nod helplessly. It's me. I came to the Longguang Academy for the spiritual light tower. Hearing him admit it, everyone's cheeks twitched for a while. Shui Lingfeng's face was filled with astonishment, and he didn't know what to say. As for Ding Mengyu and the others, although they were a little surprised, it wasn't to the extent of being shocked. They probably thought that it wasn't surprising that he could do this. As expected, after a moment, Ding Mengyu sighed softly. You seem to be able to accept all kinds of strange things? Yin Nuoxing raised his eyebrows and smiled mysteriously as he transmitted his voice. The things that I saw that day were like a brand that was engraved in my mind. I can accept all kinds of strange things that happen again. Ding Mengyu's sexy red lips parted slightly as she stroked her bangs with a faint smile. She smiled faintly and said, Actually, I guessed a little that day. It's just that I didn't have enough evidence to support my guess. Yin Nuoxing curled his lips, then looked at Shui Lingfeng and cupped his hands. Using the purple night flame, he wrote, Senior, I wonder if you got the answer you wanted? I got it. Hearing this, Shui Lingfeng smiled and nodded. He sighed and said, I didn't expect that the Academy would produce such an outstanding and abnormal new student this time. It's going to be a little lively in the future. Shui Lingfeng rubbed his palms and hesitated for a while. Then he smiled and said, After some time, about 2 or 3 months after the Divine Institute exchange, there will be a grand event. Haha, probably all the youths in the Divine Realm will be there. Junior, are you interested? A trip to the Secret Realm? After calculating the time that Shui Lingfeng mentioned, Yin Nuoxing thought of the matter that Little Moon had told him. When he saw Shui Lingfeng nod in surprise, he was even more certain. He also knew why Shui Lingfeng would bring up something that everyone was well aware of. He guessed that Shui Lingfeng wanted to invite him to go with him. If there are no accidents, I should go. Yin Nuoxing wrote. Haha, then we'll talk about it when the time comes. This trip to the Secret Realm can also be listed as a major event in the Divine Realm. Hearing this, Shui Lingfeng smiled and nodded. Then, he nodded slightly at Ding Mengyu, Lin Sheng, and the others. He turned around and left. Then, let's put everything aside for the matter in 2 days. Yin Nuoxing stretched and smiled faintly. Are you going to cultivate? Chuan Mu grinned. No, Unexpectedly, Yin Nuoxing shook his head. Everyone was stunned. After a moment, he shrugged helplessly and the word fire in front of him changed. Let's talk about it after we distribute the flyers. Everyone's cheeks twitched and the corners of their eyes twitched. Zhong Songling couldn't help but ask, and then? Then we'll go back to rest and wait for the day after tomorrow. After looking at her for a while, Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly and wrote on his book. You don't think that I need to prepare anything to deal with those little brats, do you? You've offended all the students in the academy with just one sentence, Ding Mingyu said faintly. They were also students. Didn't that mean that they were also little brats? Then this old man will go distribute the flyers. Yin Nuoxing laughed loudly. He took Xian's hand and waved at everyone. Then he stomped his foot and a teleportation formation appeared, sending them all back to the freshman area. He then flew towards the palace with Xian. Ding Mingyu and the others looked at each other when they saw how he was teasing them as he flew. Then Jun Luo mimicked Yin Nuoxing and shrugged her shoulders. She held Ding Mingyu's arm and walked towards the bamboo forest. Chuan Mu and the others chatted with Lin Sheng for a while before bidding farewell. That afternoon, pieces of white paper floated into the sky above the academy. They fell to every corner of the academy like rain. Even the secret cultivation ground were invaded, which surprised countless students. In the quiet bamboo forest, Ding Mingyu waved her hand and picked up a piece of paper that floated down from the sky. She glanced at it and couldn't help but stumble. She almost threw the blade in her hand away. That piece of paper was the one they had received for the Divine Institute exchange this morning. She had already given all of it to Yu Meng's people to handle. So this is the method he mentioned. Ding Mingyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What was in this person's head? She couldn't help but sigh when she saw the snowflake-like pieces of paper floating in the sky. If the elders discovered this, they would probably beat him to death. Perhaps they had already discovered it. Chapter 714. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. The news of the Divine Institute exchange had reached the ears of all the students. As expected, it caused a huge commotion. The exchange of the Divine Institute was a little unfamiliar to the students who had just entered the academy for 3 years. They might have heard about it, but they had never personally experienced it. During the exchange, nothing major had happened that was worthy of being remembered by the Farlight Academy. Therefore, the exchange that was held once every 3 years was a little obscure. Those who had been in the academy for 4 years and above knew about it. They had even personally experienced it. The thought of being in this world made their blood boil. At this moment, when the commotion was about to erupt, many people inclined their heads and stared at the gigantic Sword Mountain peak. The people on the peak were the pillars of the Far Radiance Academy, and there might be people hiding in the shadows. But for the experts on the Devil rankings, they were all true existences. This was especially so for the top 50. They were all peak students of the Far Radiance Academy. It's been 3 years again. Before graduation, let's end it with a beautiful dance. It's also to commemorate my 6 years in the Far Light Academy. Senior, you should cultivate properly. It won't be too late to say these words when you're in the top 10 of the Devil rankings. Shut up, don't undermine me. Oh, let's go to the Soaring Eagle Academy to cause trouble this year. Good idea, but I want to go to the Blazing Moon Academy to cause trouble. Cause trouble if you don't give me candy. Hey, are you celebrating a holiday? I think the Violent Gale Academy is not bad. Causing trouble there should be. Damn you, they're on our side. The atmosphere in the academy was boiling. Even though there was still a month before the exchange of the Divine Institute, many people were already itching to participate. The hot-blooded seniors who wanted to defend their titles and the curious and fearless freshmen. If this group of fellows rushed to the other academies, who knew what they would do to the other academies? In the Myriad God world, there were countless academies, but the majority of them were divine great academies. Among them, the most famous were the academies that belonged to the transcendent powers, such as the Far Light Academy, Blazing Fire Academy, and Violent Gale Academy. Of course, there were also other powers that would dip their fingers into this domain. No matter what, the purpose of the academies was to nurture talents. It was a relatively safe zone, and there was a qualitative difference compared to the real powers. Excellent talent could be found here, and once they were discovered, they would be sent to the higher powers and become a member of them. Some powerful academies that were supported by powerful powers were not weaker than the Elemental Academy. The only difference was the difference in reputation. When people mentioned the Elemental Academy, they would think of the 9 gods. In the eyes of others, an academy that possessed a great reputation like High Light Academy was an existence that was like a springboard. During the exchange meetings of the divine academies in the past, there were many formidable students that would try to challenge these renowned divine academies in order to spread the reputation of their academies and recruit even more genius students from there. Therefore, during the month of the exchange of the Divine Institute, the famous academies would be very vexed. There were simply too many people coming and going. Sometimes, it wouldn't be surprising if there were millions of students rushing in. Even the top geniuses of the academies would be badly battered in the face of countless challenges. Although they could refuse, every battle represented the academy. 1 or 2 battles would be fine, but if they refused all of them, it would be a little intolerable. The Farlight Academy had also tried once. The first-ranked student of the Devil rankings had fought 300 battles in a single day. He was so tired that he vomited blood and fainted. He spent the rest of the time lying down. Therefore, the famous academies would feel that those who came to the exchange didn't come with good intentions. However, they couldn't do anything about it. During the 1 month of the exchange, all the academies would be connected. All kinds of challenges would be made in a dignified manner. Moreover, the higher-ups of the academies would participate in the exchange. Therefore, there was no reason for them to refuse. They could only endure it and let those unkind people torment their students. As long as no lives were lost, there was nothing they couldn't endure. However, there was still some time before the exchange of the Divine Institute. Right now, the thing that made the Farlight Academy even more excited was the competition against the Tranquil Sea Academy. This competition had been going on for a long time, or rather, it would be better to say that it had been extended for a period of time. The competition for the top 5 was a competition between the top 5 students of both academies. It symbolized the exchange of pointers between the top students of both academies. It also served as a warm-up for the upcoming exchange of the Divine Institute. However, this was an activity unique to these 2 academies. Not all the academies were like these 2, being so close to each other. In the competition for the Half-Devil rank, the victor was the Farlight Academy. However, in the large-scale battle for the fortress, the Tranquil Sea Academy had won by a narrow margin. However, the students of the Farlight Academy were extremely unwilling to accept their loss. Because, in that large-scale battle, the other party had sent out all their elites. On the other hand, the top 5 of the Devil rankings had 1 missing and 1 recuperating. Even the top 50 had over 10 people missing. They were extremely furious. After grumbling for a long time, all the students turned their attention to the competition for the top 5. The location of the finals was the grandest battle platform, Battle King Platform. The 10,000 jong wide battle platform was activated once again. From this, it could be seen how much importance the Farlight Academy placed on the finals. After all, this was related to the face of both academies. When they lost the fortress battle in the previous battle, they could still say that they didn't have enough people. But this time, with everyone present, if they still lost, there would be nothing left to talk about. They would have to live under the prestige of the Tranquil Sea Academy for the entire year. Today, the Battle King platform was incomparably magnificent. A sea of people filled the sky and the ground. As far as the eye could see, the number of people was estimated to be in the millions. Almost 90% of the students of the Farlight Academy had come. They were so packed that not even a drop of water could trickle through. On the other side, the Tranquil Sea Academy had fewer people. However, there were still close to 10,000 of them. Their imposing manner was extremely weak in front of all the students of the Farlight Academy. However, the students of the Tranquil Sea Academy weren't afraid of such a grand scene. Each of them had an unswerving determination on their faces. What? Change the format? Yin Feng and a group of elders stood together on a tall platform. Yin Feng raised his eyebrows and looked at the middle-aged man beside him who wore a deep blue robe embroidered with 10,000 waves. He could not help but frown. Our two academies have fought so many times. This time, with your academy as the main venue, it's not a bad idea to change the format of the competition. We have to be flexible once in a while. The middle-aged man in the blue robe chuckled. This person was naturally an elder of the Tranquil Sea Academy. Looking at the huge Battle King platform below and the students that filled the sky and ground, he smiled and said, "The Farlight Academy is still full of talents. I'm envious. If you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush. Say it. What do you want to do?" Yin Feng curled his lips and glanced at him indifferently. In the past, it was always a competition between the top 5. How about changing it to a competition between the top 10 this year? Send out 10 students and fight in the arena until one side has no one left. The middle-aged man smiled faintly. Hearing this, Yin Feng glanced at him indifferently. Although he knew that the other party must have some plan, he was also confident in their students. Moreover, they had the ultimate weapon, so there was nothing to worry about. All right, seeing that you haven't won in so many years, we'll do as you say. Yin Feng chuckled. As he agreed, he did not hesitate to pour salt on the other party's wound. The middle-aged man's face twitched crazily when he heard this. He snorted in his heart, but on the surface he smiled and did not refute. After all, the Tranquil Sea Academy did not have a strong backing like the Farlight Academy. However, it was a blatant mockery to expose them like this. The middle-aged man looked at the many Tranquil Sea Academy students behind him and smiled faintly. He shouted sternly, "Boys, show some fighting spirit. Friendship comes first, competition comes second. Don't be too heavy-handed. It won't make sense if you hurt the harmony." Yes, the Remote Ocean Academy students also cupped their fists together and roared. An unyielding battle intent swept out like a storm, and the Farlight Academy students who were standing a little closer were sent flying by the battle intent due to a moment of carelessness. That student also roared in anger. Boom! Following the furious roar of the Farlight Academy student, the students beside him stood up. An even more powerful fighting spirit unfurled, causing the color of the sky to change slightly, suppressing the fighting spirit of the Tranquil Sea Academy a little. Silence. Shooting a glance at the students from both sides, Yin Feng shouted in an indifferent voice. His voice quickly penetrated the air, causing the students from both sides to tremble and gradually quiet down. Yin Feng glanced at the middle-aged man. Although the latter's words were extremely calm, Yin Feng could hear an indescribable meaning behind them. Immediately, he curled his lips and shouted in an indifferent voice, "There's a change in the format this year. The top 10 on the devil ranking, come up the stage." As Yin Feng's voice faded, the figures on the surrounding high platforms immediately began to move. One by one, they descended from the sky and stood in the middle of the battle platform. Numerous pairs of sharp eyes slowly shot towards the Serene Sea Academy side. Their eyes were filled with intense provocation. The one on the left was naturally the number 1 on the devil ranking, Feng. His leisurely and sharp aura caused the expressions of countless people to freeze. Following him was the number 2 Zhao Wenyao, number 3 Ding Mingyu, number 5 Xian Yuan, number 8 Lin Kuei, number 9 Chuan Mu, and the rest. Originally, Zhong Songling was also in the top 10. However, due to Yin Nuoxing's unexpected appearance on the devil ranking, she had regretfully withdrawn. Even now, she still did not have any thoughts of charging up. Replacing her was a gloomy-looking youth with 2 dark circles under his eyes, causing him to appear exceptionally comical. The people from the Farlight Academy cried out in excitement when they saw these people walk up the stage. Perhaps it was because the number 1 Shuel Lingfeng had appeared, but the gazes of countless people flickered with worship. Mocking laughter rang out from the Tranquil Sea Academy side. Subsequently, figures flashed and landed in an orderly manner opposite Shuel Lingfeng's group. Immediately, the students of the Tranquil Sea Academy also began to shout with high fighting spirit. The two majestic auras caused rumbling sounds to echo across the area. However, a moment later, a cry of surprise suddenly rang out amidst the cheers from the Far Light Academy. Someone silently counted and seemed to have discovered that there seemed to be one person missing from their side. Ding Mingyu habitually turned her head, wanted to take a look at Yun Nuoxing. However, when she turned her head, she suspiciously saw that the person on her right was not Yun Nuoxing, but Xin Yuan. There was a distance of more than a meter between the two of them, as if there was an invisible person standing there. Where's Junior? Ding Mingyu could not help but be stunned for a moment. Xin Yuan also turned his head when he heard this. He looked at her in astonishment and asked in a strange manner, "Hasn't he been following you recently?" Ding Mingyu shook her head. She had not seen Yun Nuoxing since the day they parted. At this moment, her charming face was slightly strange. In her impression, Yun Nuoxing was not someone who would be late for an important day, especially when he had agreed to participate in today's battle. Strange, why isn't Brother Yun here? In the surrounding spectator stands, Lin Sheng also looked at the spot on Ding Mingyu's right with a puzzled expression. Yun Nuoxing should be standing there. Yi Qinglian gently shook her head. They had not seen Yun Nuoxing recently. Lin Sheng also scratched his head strangely. First of all, it was impossible for him to be afraid of a battle. That guy could even defeat a god. So how could he be afraid of some students who had not even reached the initial god level? This also eliminated the possibility that he had forgotten. Although they had not known each other for very long, Lin Sheng knew that this guy was the same as him. Once he had agreed to something, he would do it no matter what, even if he had to risk his life for it. With this elimination, could it be that something had happened? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.